And we are live for the Portal Mountain Development Meeting number 71, discussing the framework for the polyverse dashboard. Yes, God works in mysterious ways. That cracked me up.
He said, yes, to fix the problem.
Well, look what God has done.
That is their logic, fuck.
Yeah.
It's like whenever you hear about doctors fixing somebody's problem, it's exactly the same fucking thing. It's like, our prayers were answered. Yeah, he sent you a goddamn doctor. It's beautiful.
Indeed, indeed. God answered the believer's prayers by sending him an atheist to build a boat. The Lord works in mysterious ways.
It's a raft.
It's a boat.
You can't even get that right, you stupid imbeciles.
Yep. Checkmate. Yeah, so we're just continuing on with the programming architecture for the projects, how things connect together. That's what Jenny's been working on.
Just made a small observation that is amusing me.
What's that? Recently?
So, this morning we started off, well, you know how last time we talked about the high-level stuff, and then I said we'll go and talk about the low-level stuff. And then I created this little diagram for us to follow. But what's amusing me right now is that all of that high-level stuff that we were actually talking about yesterday is showing up in the lowest of the lowest levels of the actual architecture. So it's kind of like ass backwards in some sense in the way it's phrased.
Should be expected by now.
Strange loops, baby.
Yep. Yeah, so what last time?
Last time,
what did we get into?
Last time was mostly about this kind of shit. We,
oh no, the camera froze. Not this one. Just seeing if we can get our scene back. Here we go, I guess. So last time, conversation engine, agents, conversations, messages, lobbies.
Yeah, so the actual big objects that we're conceptually manipulating as we're thinking through through the dashboard.
Yeah.
So we have our agents sitting in a dashboard, presented as a lobby. They initiate the conversations with present agents on that lobby, and the conversation have messages and they end. That's the general gist of the interaction, right?
Sure, yeah.
With the chat being like the main UI that we're envisioning for how that all goes together.
All right.
So that's last meeting in a nutshell about what we're presenting as an MVP.
Right, yeah, we were talking about product sort of sprinting, if you will, towards production.
Yeah, actually today marks the end of the first iteration of the Polyverse project.
Oh yeah, a somewhat complete document.
Yeah, if you may, can you please go to the browser and pull up the Polyverse? Yeah. Hit projects tab. What the fuck? Oh, close that.
Close what?
Just jump right in. So you have a dashboard project.
Yep.
Fucking hell. jump right in. So you have a couple of tabs here. This is the sprint itself. Are you doing something specific?
Yeah, just sharing the screen.
Okay. So you'll notice that we have a moving date line.
Is it a Gantt chart or?
Kind of. It would present itself as one if we had interdependent issues.
Milestones or whatever.
Yeah. And then there's the board tab at the top.
Board.
Yeah, it's just different views of the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So what you'll see is like what's been started, what's to do still. So these correspond. Some of these correspond to pull requests for work that's being done there. So the issue being worked on, and then merging of the code into the code base is another element after the fact. So everything is like divvied up to manage the workflow between demand, request, demand, supply, demand, supply, demand, supply. This is like our this is where we're going to have our meta schedule managed.
Cool.
So that's the project, the purpose of the project inside of GitHub organization. So I've set all that up. It's clear that I'm just working on this, just real fundamental shit. I've got a lot of the underlying bits kind of working, like testing, server running, client app running, things are showing, all that stuff.
Yep.
I've also went ahead and set up that storybook thing I was telling you about for independent component development.
Sorry, just setting up.
Independent component development, so that it's not bogged down by other development. So we can literally move independently of each other. So I just wanted to show you the ins and outs of good old GitHub. What to expect. I'm working to really organize this shit so that it's easy for anybody to approach. As soon as you get past that stage of being caught in like a deer in the headlights scenario, I've greased up everything I could possibly find to grease.
Nice.
So when you jump into it, it's not going to overwhelm anybody. Anyway, that's that. Just wanted to show you the general layout of where we're going to work. Not sure what else I could say about that, so we can just jump back into our normal conversation, unless this comes up again for some referential purposes.
Right.
Yeah. So let's get back to what we were going to go for today then. So covering this as an overarching guide for what the fuck we're building. So that's what informs that part. We are now going down a few steps into like more fundamental stuff, like how we're going to build out an actual system that's deployable in a variety of scenarios that functions self-similarly in every one of them.
Yep.
That's like the gist of how the dashboard is supposed to really operate, right? And so the conversation that we had yesterday is being relegated to a part of the architecture.
You mean last week?
The week before last.
Yeah.
So yeah, what that was part of my amusement, is that we're noticing that given the entire fundamental setup of the architecture, it's actually the last conversation is sitting in the domain logic part of the setup, which means really it's like one of the lowest layers of that architecture that we're talking about now. So the driving higher level design decisions show up in code in the lowest parts of the system.
Yeah.
It's just a fun fact to think about as far as kind of looking at these models. It's a good it's a good way to like appreciate the switch in context there.
Yeah. Well, like we're starting with programming at the most fundamental layer, and we're sort of ensuring that whatever building pieces that we have to use are already aligned with the highest level thinking possible.
All right. And the other thing to note is that all of the other pieces that are mentioned here are a way to connect that idea to the external world. So all of the layers that you're seeing past that aren't about the domain. They're more like taking that and pushing it out to the user and being like, can you like play with me, right? Like, how do you manage all of that in communication?
Yeah. How are you there? Good? Yeah.
Gimme, gimme, gimme. Gimme, gimme. Right. So,
Yep.
you're kind of you kind of can help me guide me as say you're jumping in, which you are. It's just the way it is. So you're jumping in into like the whole client side development of the interface, right? Like this is kind of that conversation that needs to be had, and I think it could be beneficial to hash it out as a developer to developer conversation about how to approach the very last end of that pipeline that I'm describing here. So-
Yeah, it's still like not clear the architecture, the various languages used. I don't really know what their purpose is exactly and how they connect. Because if I were to go to start working with React, well, that works with Refine, right? That's what you're saying.
So I tried to qualify that more. The refine stuff is a background thing that you assume works and you don't have to think about. So it's a piece behind the scenes that says, I can't show you this interface because a permission issue, right? So basically, by the time you're dropped into the component itself that you're trying to figure out, you have all the data available, or else the component wouldn't even be up for rendering to begin with. So you don't have to worry about what refine would do. Refine is just a behind-the-scenes addresser of things that cut across many different things.
Why don't we look at React, assuming is that what I would be working?
Yes, React and
with?
JSX.
Okay, so
And
show
that's
me
it.
my object types, I suppose, and then how I'm configuring them to do different things.
Well, I can easily show you what it basically looks like. What the fuck is it? Did you close it or something? Alright.
No, you right clicked
Oh.
or left click or whatever.
Got it. So that's the actual repo. It's just the main branch is pretty empty. So here is a Fuck off.
Why don't you just use a mouse?
Oh, I forgot there was one here. So, this is what you do. You'd write a hello world component,
hold on a sec.
a test,
Wait.
and a story.
Wait.
Okay? Now,
Okay.
go into the component.
What?
Just click into it. Look at that. It's just a function, right? And it outputs some markup. In this case, a string of text without any actual markup.
Why is it an empty tag?
It's a React thing I'll explain to you later. It's called a fragment. In React, you have to return a component. So if you have a list of things, you're going to have to enclose it into a fragment to create a one component list. So in this case, I'm using just plain text. I have to enclose it in a component to just make it work. It's an implementation of React detail. That's not important.
Fine.
The point being is that it's this simple. It's creating functions that do a return with your output.
Fine.
And they'll take arguments for parameters and use that data to do their logic. So that's a component. Then you have a component test. A component test renders the component and expects the screen to have a specific output because of that rendering. That way you keep it in check. So you give it different parameters to render, it should render differently. You should be able to expect things to be different.
Yeah.
So that's testing. So you will be you write a component, you write a test, you write a story. And a story is a way to present the component independently of any application. So in this case,
Is this that storyboard thing or?
yeah, storybook. So in this case, it's going to give you a nice little menu with the hello world title words. The actual component will be in hello world. That's just some checking shit. Generate the actual story is another manual step, but anyway. And then the default story itself, render it this way, render it that way. You can have different stories. You can have story 1, story 2, story 3, and each time you render it, you would pass in different arguments.
Okay.
So it just gives you all the variations that you can have of that component that you would want.
So how do you run it?
Oh, the storybook? I can show
Just whatever this hello thing is.
So storybook runs through that code spaces thing. So if you want me to take you through that, I will. But there is a command. You start up your code space. There's going to be run storybook command for you. That's available, and you just and it just pops up a window and you explore it through a browser.
How long does that take?
Once everything is set up in your code space, which it saves without running. It doesn't keep running it, but it saves them. So it's like the state is saved.
Have you've set this up though, haven't you?
Yeah, yeah.
So why do I have to
each
set it
user
up?
has because it's a free organization, so each user is responsible for their billing for their code spaces.
Yeah, because
So
I can do other stuff with it, not just Polyverse if I want.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So that means
Okay.
every individual user of GitHub has to set up their own code spaces. So it's a small step, necessary evil, but it's just done once basically.
Right.
And again, I'm trying to make sure that it's just like command 1, command 2, everything's installed, you're good to go. So we'll get there. I assume it works because it does. I've already tested that. you can explore Storybook's own documentation to get familiar with what the fuck it is. But
Yeah.
but a lot.
That's fine.
But as a basic intro, you'll write your hello world component.
Well, I'm gonna have to use that, aren't I?
Yeah.
So why don't we set it up right now then?
Because,
Unless it's gonna take a long time.
because it might be a dependency thing that I'll have to research. I'll do it for you if necessary, or get you connected with you outside of this.
Okay.
Another thing to note is that without code spaces, you can still actually do this. You can actually commit changes right here in GitHub without having to go through any of that shit.
Shit.
Through any code space.
Oh.
This is like raw file editing.
Well, I
right there.
assumed you can do raw file editing.
So you can do it in the repository without code space if, for whatever reason, you need to. It's just a quick, simple go-to. Usually, it's best for documentation sites and stuff like that. So that's called a fragment. It's basically a component without a name, enclosing the hello world text.
Yeah.
And a fragment is a React feature. It's just a nameless component, basically. It's a hello world component. It literally needs nothing. Just text.
Yep.
So yeah, there's literally nothing I would want beyond this cycle of development. Create the component, test,
Okay.
store it.
So
Go through Storybook to make sure it all works, which will figure it out. Once it's done, it's done.
at what point is our okay, so the components we're making are for user interface.
Yeah, all the markup you can ever imagine being spat out on a page is going to come from these functions.
So what are my archetypes or whatever being passed up through the more fundamental layers? Do I have a way of accessing what a domain is or what an agent is? Is there already some
yes.
sort of namespace
Yes,
happening that I should be aware of?
Yes,
So I'm going to be using those?
You will be always working in the context of some kind of resource. So you will have access to that resource.
Yeah, so I need to see the resources.
What's
the shape of resources?
The shape of resources are not defined yet.
Its properties.
Yeah, it will be like that. Yes, it will be an object that conforms to a specified schema that you will be
Okay.
familiar with.
So
works
I
this
can't
way.
just start writing the UI before we've even gone over what are our
Right. So this stuff is now will need to somehow bubble up all the way
there's a
to
term
here.
for it. Yeah. So why don't we do that?
That's what we're doing. That's actually what we're going for.
Okay.
And specs here will play at least one of them is going to play a huge role in pushing that information back and forth
Okay.
between the.
So we need to basically map this domain. These
Yep.
domains.
Yep.
So what's our preferred schema for? What's our preferred schema for mapping domains? For creating schemas for domains in what language or what format? And then let's just start. What is a domain? What is an agent?
Okay, so the word domain doesn't really pop up in the dashboard as one of the resources. The domain does not talk about. Sorry, the dashboard does not talk about different domains.
Yeah, I don't care what level we start at, just as long as we do start on some level and start defining objects or whatever.
There's a method to approach this with that doesn't require too deep of a dive up front. Okay? I'm gonna go to the washroom and come back and explain what the fuck I meant
I know what you
in
mean.
like 2 seconds.
That's boring though.
So
Well, but even still, that's fine because then we can talk at a significant layer that we're interested in
yeah.
and just start talking about the rest as if it exists and then link it down.
It's
after.
a phrase you've heard, but probably have no real. We actually have discussed it before, but now it's becoming the method behind the madness. So it's atomic design, and it is a way to constrain yourself to just starting with the lowest level components that are UI centric entirely, not domain centric, and build up from there to the domain centric stuff once it's all figured out. So
Okay. So this is what we've already been doing,
bite size.
like that PDF that I made, right? Like the UI.
It's taking that and starting to slice it up into actual functions.
Yeah, that's fine.
And this process should be like really, really simple because if you think about it, each one of those wireframe squares or whatever, right? It's a function. You just write another hello world function to represent it, and by the time you need to put it all together, you just figure out how to configure this damn component.
Yep.
So it can work really all the sides.
And with that, we shall be right back. What?
So you've seen what a component is, right?
Sure.
It's a straightforward function. Its return value is basically the markup you'll spit out. It takes a couple of parameters in, does logic, spits out markup. Very simple concept, right?
Sure.
You're not tripped up by the logistics of this kind of programming, right? Like it just drops you into a really basic JavaScript sort of environment.
Sounds good.
Part 1. Part 2, atomic design to control this madness. So, instead of touching markup ever,
Sounds kind of exciting.
you treat. So pretend in the atomic design there's an analogy made between particles and design pieces. So
Components.
yeah, so in atomic design, your atoms is your lowest level of things you touch as far as building stuff from. So you need to build atoms, atomic components.
Okay.
Treat raw HTML as the protons, electrons, and neutrons. So they're not atoms. They're building blocks of atoms only. Right?
Right.
So you build a catalog of atoms out of markup combinations. From there, you take your atoms, combine them into what's called molecules. And molecules provide like interactiveness state and all of that kind of stuff. So if like your search button if your search text box is being typed in, it can do something like look up potential matches in a list or something like that. It's like a combination of atoms working together as a full chemical, if you will.
Sure.
So you have a catalog of molecules at that point, and now the analogy breaks down as far as particle stuff. The next layer beyond in atomic design is called the template, and that's your layouts. So you have a layout and all of the information about how to disperse different parts of this layout into different components.
Layout, you say?
Yeah, so square A appears here in grid B, position X, whatever. Like all of these kinds of different positioning information. And then...
And like nesting as well? Like,
well, each layout can have... Like, what you put inside a layout could be a whole recursive cycle again. So you can put layouts and layouts and layouts and layouts and layouts.
Uh-huh. Subdel?
And the final one is called page.
Just programming?
Yeah, and the final one is called page, is where you take a layout and you tell it what to put into each slot. So you send it atoms, you send it molecules, you send it other layouts. And compose everything that way.
Word.
So by sticking to this process, it's basically a much more manageable beast instead of just like doing one-offs for everything.
Yeah, that's the point. Not to repeat yourself in programming, right?
Actually, that's going to be such a huge constraint. Like, I'm going to beat people over the head with a stick.
Yeah.
What I mean that is, like, we'll have a code review process, and in that review...
There's a moose in the fridge down there if you want. Or creams.
Yeah. In the review process, though, like, it will be very much like, no, I can't accept this, we need to fix this part, that part,
Yep.
the other part. It'll be like, the idea is good, it works, but this needs to be done this way, this has to go there.
Well,
If it's missed.
As soon as you start adding arbitrarily complex areas to the code, it goes off of that kind of strange loopy perfection in which everything is self-centered on itself.
Yeah.
You're just having an arbitrary branch of code which doesn't really jive with the rest of it if you want to manipulate that portion in the same way.
The only exceptions made here are where there are known points of interaction that are simply too far out of reach for MVP.
Yeah, like stuff
So
like just
fake,
good
so
enough
fake it
for
till
now.
you make it. Yeah.
Good enough for now, but also anytime you're like translating, I think too has that feeling of arbitrariness.
hmm Surprisingly, there are very few translations, but the ones that we do have are very critical and in the specific slots that they've been placed into. One of them is the translation between domain-specific language to drive the very core of the app to the all of the different other back-end pieces and front-end pieces that speak their own um, uh, contexts.
Yeah.
So between those, we have specifications to guide how that is communicated.
Those are the specs.
Yeah, that's so we have two specs that are standards, and one that's basically a transformation of a data to domain driven design and back. So it's like, so you speak domain language when you speak app, when you speak to the core. So there needs to be a way to give this an API that says, I'm talking to an entity. These are the criteria for how it works. But that's all going to be
Yeah.
encoded once and reused and reused by everything. So it's not like it's going to be a growing, festering sore point.
Yep.
By sticking to the specs, once we cover the specs, most of the work is done. And we don't really need to do anything except adjust to new versions of specs. Right? Work smart, not hard.
Correct.
Yep.
So yeah.
Specs are just like the self-domain sort of the app itself, kind of.
Yeah, look, one of the specs is basically how to discover how to find the information you're requiring. So if I'm an object connected to another object, I'm going to have a link to that other object, and the client can pull that information too. Right? So that's what the spec is doing. It's just telling it where to go to get this. The other spec is like, okay, I'm an API. You're going to need this information, that information, this information. You'd have to send multiple requests to do it. Why don't I just package it all into one, send that, just as a one-drop package. So that's another spec. And it's a one-to-one mapping. They just need one function to go from one direction and then the other. It's like nobody needs to worry about that shit. It's going to be done once and forgotten about. You only use them in specific cases. One of them being you're sending over the wire. You package it up. You don't send it over the wire, just send this straight up. It's coming from local anyway.
Yeah. That's all great, in great context. But I feel like you don't really want to get into that.
No. What I'm
So
telling you what the
let's
specs are there
carry
for.
on with what our use, not use case, but our approach. So I'm a developer writing what components. So what do we do now? I've already written wireframe diagrams for the app,
Yeah.
which kind of loosely are reflected by what a component
Yeah,
would
just
be.
creating the functions that reflect those same wireframes.
So why don't we go back to thinking in wireframe terms
Yep.
and set up I don't know if it's a story of an agent joining a lobby using their dashboard and sending a message or something, right?
So user logging in, there's status announcement, availability, and all that crap. Then there is conversation initiation. Then there is conversation participation. So there's like 4 different stories that would enact the whole
Right.
thing.
So, but that's what the next step would be, right?
Yeah. So logging in, not an issue for MVP. Why? The dashboard you're logging into is yourself. So you're self-authenticating in that case. So all authentication is true. Okay?
Yeah.
That makes sense? So for this case, because we're not talking about to an online anything, it's just all self-contained in one spot. Boring you yet?
No, I don't know. That's my own mind. Whatever.
Dylan's got his own thoughts.
Software dev is its own beast. So many moving parts. I know something funny, trivially unimportant, but just funny to me, at least. The rocket boosters on the shuttles and all of that shit, their specifications are guided by at least 2,000 years of bureaucracy from the Roman Empire as to what size they had to be. And that's a wild fucking trek of a story, because it basically goes like this. It had to go through it had to be delivered by rail. That railroad was going through a tunnel. That tunnel was the spec with the railroad system. That railroad system is transposed all the way back from England, because all of the tools to build the North American rail system were started there and kind of just reused. Yeah. Right. Anyway, long story short, the roads there have a specific size all the way back because of the Roman Empire, and the Roman chariots had a specification to them because they had to accommodate exactly 2 horses. Yeah. So literally, that fucking rocket is designed based on the specifications of 2 horses' asses.
Yeah. I heard that somewhere.
Yeah. It's been on Facebook for a few times, but I just love that story. It just goes to show you how insidious writing something down can actually be. Like, how do you even connect 2,000 years of Roman Empire chariots to a goddamn rocket? Yeah. But there is a way.
Yeah, somewhere they tie together.
And it's all bureaucratic. Mm-hmm. All of it is paperwork.
Yeah.
It's fucking insane how we live like this. And don't even realize that that's how we live. Like, all of this is built to all of these specs, right? Where did these specs come from? Fucking hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, trial.
Well, there's that, but then there's also like ingrained bureaucratic standards and all of that shit that doesn't change all that often.
Yeah, because they gotta make money somehow from something.
Penalties. Good old penalties.
Yep.
Anyway.
It's evolution. It's whatever works. Just keep doing it.
So, yeah, you're right. Like, let's bring up the wireframes and build us a phone app. I'll now be sitting like this, pretending I have a phone in my hand.
Good.
I do have a phone.
You don't have to pretend.
Don't have to. It's funny. I'm gonna share.
Yeah. The Lord works in mysterious ways.
So close. Lead on. Because this is your shit. Forget broadcast though.
Alright, let's just do...
Or entering domains.
Let's just redo this exercise, basically.
Yeah. Just bare bones. You're already logged in by default. You can start a conversation with the agent that you see, which is yourself.
Yep.
It's not connecting to anybody else, so it doesn't matter. You can start multiple conversations and just talk to yourself. That's what I do.
Keeps you busy. No, just to himself.
well, the actual You ask yourself a question, think about what you just wrote, and be like, oh yeah! Notes. It's taking notes. The idea is that we're mimicking conversations, and one of the ways that it's presenting is that you can have a little conversation within your mind with yourself, right? So why block that kind of capacity? It's just reflected back on the software. Have it like as a note taker situation. Works. Pose yourself a question, answer it a little later after some research because you noted that you needed an answer. Close the conversation when you have it. Why not?
See, Dill, everything in life is a conversation. Remember yesterday? I was trying to get all spiritual on Dill. I felt he was receptive.
I don't remember yesterday.
No, it was
I wasn't here.
Yeah, whatever, Friday.
I was drinking yesterday.
Or whatever it
Good
was.
times.
But yeah, just that we have to have a conversation with the universe, with our world around us. Not just assume what it is, but you have to like
Well, okay, but it's
be
a
in conversation.
To understand this properly, it should be taken more metaphorically than literally.
Yeah.
It is the concept.
Like you don't talk to the table like, "Hello, are you still holding
No.
my can there, good buddy?"
The conversation
thanks.
with a can is this: picking it up and drinking it. That's a conversation, but it's a physical
I think
one.
Dill got that.
I know. I don't even know where people are at with most things, so it's more like clarity, clarifying, stating the obvious sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
If I state the obvious, just ignore it. Comes from a place of ignorance.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the bit of software, and we're just trying to figure out how do you go from screen to this screen, what makes sense as far as like you're tapping on your phone, how do you want to do it.
Like an app you're talking about developed?
Yeah, it is an app designed to reflect the human mind, basically, aka the conversation, and take it from there, basically. But phone is like the primary, like, sort of key device targeted because, people and their phones. But it could be a website, it could be just desktop app, it could be any of those things. It's supposed to be any of those things. And you can have an app here and app there, and it could pretend to be the same person. So what you type here is what they type there. So any of those kinds of weird combinations of like, basically when you go out into the internet, you don't have to like be here or there or anything. You can be like a whole network of things at once. So there's lots of more intricate stuff, but it starts with talking to itself. Once it talks to itself, it can talk to itself in other places. And that's kind of the idea.
It's not so much talking to yourself in third person, but
Yeah, getting the concept right of being able to have that conversation, and then you just swap out who the other receiver of that conversation is, and it just works. So, first step is to not bother. Second step, just swap it all in. Bam! Money!
Mm-hmm.
No, there's not gonna be money. In fact, one of the questions, I was going through like this whole business talk with the AI as to like how to get this shit that was an organized project, and he's like, so where do you see this dashboard business of yours in 3 to 5 years? And I'm like, I see it disintegrated, having served its purpose. The AI is like, this is not a standard business model whatsoever.
Good luck with that.
No, it appreciated and navigated that with grace, but the fact that it asked me that to begin with, I'm like, fuck. How do I tell it that in a way that it doesn't tell me I'm an idiot?
make it out of fucking meltdown. Your computer lights up.
Yeah. Because most of the organizational social functions that we're thinking of are like once they serve their purpose, they don't need to be there. Like, you don't need to be there to just make money. You're there to serve a purpose in the social structure, right?
Mhm.
That purpose being served, the people can disintegrate and reintegrate into a different context over and over and over and over. So long as everything is moving, there's no need to continually hoard money, you know, and like just like that activity becomes useless.
Yeah.
So that. So it's hard to express that to an AI that thinks about businesses being the key pinnacle of civilization. Jesus. You know how money works.
Yeah.
We like to say we love our jobs, but really we just like eating.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Pretty passionate about not starving.
Yeah.
That's like literally. Do you know anybody who doesn't actually think that in the back of their heads and only presenting a front for like being a team player and a go-getter? I can't see anybody who truly believes that bullshit, and yet everybody demands it out of everybody. It's so
Yeah.
fucking gross.
You gotta play the game, you know. You gotta act the part in order to strive.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
I signed up for Hollywood. That was my job description.
Mhm.
We need like what, 2-3 screens? We need like being in the lobby. We need our agent list. And we need some kind of way to initiate and invite said agents to the conversations that we're going to have. So we'll also need a conversations that one is participating in.
Okay.
I think we could stop there.
Like, I mean, I'm pretty sure I've already like outlined these, so we can just start with whatever I have.
So yeah, start with that and refine. Because like those screens, they're like pretty much self-explanatory. Lists of conversation, list of users, a feed for both lobby and conversation, an interface to initiate conversations and send messages.
Okay, say that list again. I'll just write down the list, and then we can see what we have.
We have a list of agents,
Mm.
a list of conversations,
Okay.
we have the feed
In a conversation.
or
So-
lobby. It
so
doesn't matter.
view
It's the same feed. Conversations simply filter what messages.
Okay, so we'll just call it the feed.
Yeah.
Okay.
An interface to initiate conversation with agents,
Right.
an interface to send messages in a conversation or lobby.
Isn't that the feed?
Yeah, send messages to the feed itself.
So
whatever
feed / message, like that's the same thing, isn't it?
Well, the feed displays the historical record. The message interface shoves messages into the historical record. So it's a kind of a disconnected feature.
But why would you? Yeah.
One is a data mutation, one is a data query.
But don't you usually have like a text box to post
Yeah.
whenever you're looking at a feed? Like
Yeah.
there's a text box. So how are these different screens?
So, oh, okay, you're talking about like a screen.
That are we making screens or what?
Well, I was thinking more like the individual internal components of the screen.
Well, we have to break those down though.
Yeah.
So we'll start with the screens themselves,
So,
right?
okay. I don't know. So the screen that, okay, the feed screen would have your query, the feed itself, and then it would have the interface to send a message into
Yeah.
said feed. So it would
Right.
have that.
Yep.
And that's like your standard chat interface for any app that you've ever seen. So that's not a problem to really resolve, I don't think.
That's the feed screen.
Just copy what
So we've
people
got
do.
that. Initiate conversation.
So yeah, you need to have a button. I don't know which screen it goes on. but somewhere in this system,
So that's probably list of
you're
agents.
sitting in the lobby. You should be able to get to your agents, and you should be able to initiate conversations with them somehow. So, starting off of the feed screen, what do we see, such that we can see the agents, and so seeing the agents itself is a screen, should be a list of agents.
Now, this is a list of agents that's contextual.
Yes, to the dashboard. But in this case, it's going to be one agent, you. We don't need to worry about that. Not yet.
Okay.
Yes,
yeah.
yes
Start
later. but-
simple and add.
Yeah, so we don't need to worry about adding agents, subtracting agents. The dashboard is the agent. Okay. Once this dashboard becomes authenticated with another
You good
dashboard,
there?
no, I'm good. Once the dashboard is authenticates with another dashboard, it presents itself as an agent there. And so on it goes.
Right. Okay. So I'm thinking in terms of story. Like I'm kind of reminded of like user experience story
Mhm.
or UI story, whatever.
Yeah, that's the right direction.
We need to first just clearly define our scenario here.
Yeah.
Like what is happening.
So the starting scenario, when you run the app,
It's
you
like
open
an
your
agent
browser or you click on your icon on your phone.
joins
You're in the lobby.
a lobby. Agent joins a lobby and sends a message. Right.
Sends a message or into the lobby. No conversation.
That's the
Okay.
default.
Okay,
Yeah.
works for me. Simple. Cuts out cruft.
Yeah. Right, like we're starting as
So
just as small as possible, right? And we
Yeah.
add those things. That's what
you're
you're talking
already
about.
authenticated. You're already authorized.
Joins a lobby and sends a message. What the fuck are you doing?
Being Windows.
Jeez. Okay. That was
If I'm
weird.
right, it's one app to rule them all. No matter what device you have, you're just using this damn dashboard to do everything. Because it shapeshifts into everything.
Like, what do you mean, Chrome or something?
It uses Chrome to do the actual communication stuff, like so sending the information over the web and all of that stuff, but none of that has, look, all of it. It's more like controlling what it sends, how it sends it, so that when you get it all back, it's all one system communicating with itself. So it's piggybacking on those technologies
Okay.
and just uses them as the internet. So yeah, it'll work through Chrome or just like open up an app on your phone, or like it could literally be a web page or a real app or any of those things, and it's just the same thing over and over and over again, talking to same things over and over and over again. So it knows everything to do. It's like an operating system sitting on top of your other actual operating system, but more social aware. Just keeps on talking to itself. Boy. List of agents, list of conversation, feed query, and send. So, query and mutate. That's probably what you want as your terminology. Data mutation is the way it's normally conceived. So you want stability in your data. You don't want to mutate it in inappropriate places. So it's isolated.
So very simple.
Mm-hmm.
We're basically in the
Call it a
feed.
message feed, please. because
Okay.
because no matter what it's always going to be a feed of messages, like even in any other engine anyway. Message types will differ.
So we're just assuming it's the agent has joined a lobby, therefore they're presented with the message feed.
Yes.
Of that
So
lobby.
basically, when it comes to
So
authentic,
that's our first
yeah,
landing screen.
yeah,
if you
anything
will.
to do with authentication just simply returns true by default, which
We
is
know
why
that.
why everything is working.
We're assuming that the rest of the program is functioning.
Oh, it's going to be built like that. There's going to be like an actual authentication process it's going to go through, but it's just always going to return true for the time being.
So yeah, I get it. We want to
And
have the
authorization.
ability to list the agents in the lobby, because there are more than one.
Yeah, except in this case, you're only ever going to be able to get a reference to this one agent,
Okay,
and that's the
and
dashboard itself.
list of conversations. This is like this is something that needs to be generalized outside of just the message feed, but it's within the message feed is also this
Yeah,
chunking.
you have to have access to this list somehow. How that list is
Mhm.
presented is a different question. Yeah. So, feed, navigate to a list of agents, navigate to a list of conversations somehow.
Isn't this gets into broadcast though, doesn't it?
No.
The fact of
Forget
there
broadcast.
being a list and what qualifies as a conversation.
Well, minimal liability here. We can hook the
You
broadcast.
can't escape it, man.
We can hook the broadcast engine into behind the scenes after the MVP.
Right, but I'm just saying the fact of having a list of conversations, in other words, a list of groups of messages that have become a thing.
It's also
That becoming a thingness is a broadcasting.
I think you're hitting on a different point actually. Message feed, agent feed, conversation feed, all could be messages. So,
Yeah.
a message, an agent message, conversation message,
Of course, yeah.
and so we can re-implement the feed-in component basically
Yeah.
to do these things. Except it's
Okay.
going to be different by display.
So message feed, that's we've joined the lobby with it's a message feed. So the first thing, an agent join message, right? And then
So that you mean like into the lobby?
or conversation message start. Yeah, things going into the
Yeah,
feed.
yeah, everything. Basically, yeah, you can now decompose everything into being in messages sent.
Yeah.
You write that. Basically, yeah. Even the entire process of joining the dashboard is something sending messages to the conversations of something else.
Yeah.
That's
And those can be kept on record and reprocessed to get a list of agents or whatever.
exactly.
Pretty heavy duty stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I hate programming. I have to be at least drinking or smoking or something.
How long you figure it'd take you to program something like that?
Like our whole project. I don't know. I don't even know. I never would come up with it. I'm not a programmer type. I'm just trying to learn as little amount as possible to like do what I need to do with
Yeah.
it. Right, but there's a lot to it, to this architecture that we're working on. It's
Do you need like special programs and shit to like program something and make it happen?
just good websites. They have all the services for you. Like a good project management website will let many people connect and all see like the different tasks that have to be done. Like it kind of organizes you together. Lets you checkbox that things are done, like as a team, kind of stuff. Yeah, it's sort of it's like that, but for programming. There's environments. Yeah, programming has always been
Nemesis.
just it just gets me to my core. But I know it's important, and it's we're basically a software company. That's the only real product we could make, right? It's got to be software.
But I'm gonna get out of here.
Oh no, dude.
Leave
Sure.
You guys to your discussions.
Cool, man.
What's that?
Dill's gonna peace.
Ah.
Until next time.
Yeah, buddy.
Sign
We've killed all interest. I'm joking. I'm just selfish.
I got stuff.
Yeah, enjoy the
Yeah,
rest of your
man.
day, man.
See you later. So like, sort of, I guess ideally the way I'm kind of thinking here is that when everything is a message that's simple, it's a message on a feed. This is kind of like what a lobby is, sort of like it really seems attached to that,
Mm-hmm.
or at least the fact that it would have a log of things happening at it.
You're making a great point in pointing out that basically like everything becomes a feed of messages in that sense. So once we implement that, right, that basic structure of feed messages, we can say, okay, reuse that for this, reuse that for that. Just this is the criteria for these messages. This is the criteria for those messages.
Yeah, exactly. So, but also, I was kind of thinking along the lines too of every lobby has a collection. The feed is a collection of these messages, and you can sort them by date if you want.
Yeah,
kind of that
or
kind of
any
stuff.
kind of sorting criteria. Yeah, whatever query you desire, basically, into your data.
Yeah, so the point there is that ideally when you join a lobby, you would download the entire feed. Maybe you don't have to.
The entire applicable feed.
Like, it's making me wonder, like, if an agent joined at the very beginning, like 2 years ago, do you need to download the entire thing back to 2 years to see that, or would you have certain like update messages where it's
So-
like people grouped together, like maybe in one message saying like this many people are here?
That's a question for how the app is navigated, and what you want to do is basically present the user interface that they're most interested in, and if they need something beyond that, go fetch it. Right? So, in a situation like this, you would do what's called usually an infinite scroll. An infinite scroll UX is basically once you reach a threshold, past a certain point, you just download the next page and download the next page and download the next page. And if you do it cleverly enough, you can prefetch it before you hit that threshold. So if you notice that the user is scrolling a little bit past the history that they have access to, you just go, oh, fetch me another page of history. Fetch me 3 pages, just to be sure.
I guess what I'm thinking about is like, let's say a chat has been open for 5 years and many people join at the beginning. That's when their first agent join message exists. but I'm assuming that in these sort of asynchronous environments, you would have certain broadcasts such as, hey, I'm agent, I'm still here, this is my original join message, but that's like a new message, right?
Like a ping.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. There's no.
Because I'm trying to imagine like the official list of agents in this. Like that idea doesn't seem to exist as much as simply this agent has joined, this agent has joined.
Officiality implies like a permanent identity and all of that, which is
Exactly.
This is
So
not
like
really
I hope you get what
communicating.
I'm like getting at.
Yeah, like you could have a situation with ping messages and stuff like
Okay,
that.
we need a list of agents.
But purpose.
Let's
we got to define the purposes. Like what would it do, right? Until we have something for it to do, like why would we send it? So if we
Yes.
have a situation where conversations close, for example, then this kind of a question becomes important.
Okay, so
Like timeouts, for example.
every message feed, in other words, a lobby,
Right
has to have a list of agents
Ri-
available.
now, you know what? For simplicity's sake, let's imagine this. Whatever the state is, it's permanent. So if we mutate it to be this, next time we query it, it's that. It's all very deterministic. Right? So all we have to worry about is like what was our original state and what happens when we dispatch a message to it. The state will transform itself. That's the source of truth. We query that. We send another message to it. It transforms
Okay,
itself.
hold
we
on
query
there.
that.
Like, let's just focus on the
Yes,
writing. Okay, like this page right here, this sheet. Let's develop this
Mhm.
because I feel like I keep trying to like, okay, let's just develop this, but you're like going on explaining of like architecture of like, okay, but we're still not adding the next point and stuff here.
I think the elaboration is because we've switched from looking at a list of agents, a list of conversations, to being a feed of agents, a feed of conversation,
Yeah.
messages.
Sure.
And that's the important key takeaway.
Good.
So we can move up from there. But we got into
Yeah.
like that ping message thing, and that's just a bit of a segue.
That will probably may come up in
So definitely not now, though.
So let's say the list of agents is a feed of agents, right?
Mm-hmm.
Feed of agents. In other words, it's the feed filtered to only have agent messages.
So it's like taking all of the joined agent messages and processing them into a list of available agents for conversation,
Yeah.
and removing from that list anytime an agent leaves, message arrives, or stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. So it's almost like this feed window has different like lenses you put over it,
Mhm.
like a blue lens and a red
Variations.
lens, but it's still the feed window.
That's called a variant.
Okay, so
And it's
agent-
an important concept to remember. So every time you have the situation, start thinking, okay, got one object, different variants, different variations of this.
happy.
Hey man, we're using the proper language to describe the proper things. Yeah, fuck. Because next time I say variant, you don't have to learn it all
Fine.
over again.
Okay. So this is a list of agent join.
No. check this out. It's going to be the feed of agents, but the way the feed is processed is by those messages. So the messages dictate what does not belong into the feed. So any messages that says I've joined the lobby, but doesn't have a corresponding I've left the lobby,
Mm-hmm.
means that that agent is viable to be in the feed.
Yeah.
It's like a filtration mechanism.
Yeah. So it's not just a raw list of every left came and went and go.
No, it's
a-
like taking
it's
that
meant
information.
to be updated.
It's taking that information as a configuration.
There's a tiny bit of logic there of joined without left.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's beautiful. Conversations is a list of started conversations that have not been ended.
Yeah.
Or at least live conversations. Ended conversations is a list of everything that does have a conversation ended message denoting its demise.
Right. Fine.
So
maybe
that already-
two different.
So this is cool because this is already saying in here we have to have message type for this message type for that, message type for this. What now we need to figure out like what do those messages actually send? Like for example, conversation started message is going to be entirely computational, right? It's going to denote who started the conversation, which conversation we're talking about, who the other agents are requested to participate is, right? Like it's going to be an internal message.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But we're already locking the interface into being send message only. And that's beautiful. Because we're only going to ever send messages. Ever.
Excellent.
You have created a real constraint for the dashboard, man. I don't think you understand. That's
Let's just- let's keep rolling.
You're an owner here. You're actually influencing the product. Like that's a pivot for me. Because I wasn't going to do it this way, but now I am. And that's because of you.
Thanks, man. It's good to know I'm appreciated.
I'm not just words, man. I respond.
Okay, so this is and sends a message.
Agent joins
Conversation.
agent joins lobby message. Agent joins conversation message. Because joining a lobby
Yeah.
is the lobby.
Sure.
Conversation carries conversation
lobby.
information
This is technically the start of a conversation, I guess. But anyways.
with the dashboard itself. Sure.
Mm-hmm. Conversation start message.
It will include the initiator, the
Right.
new conversation ID, the
Yeah, like this is.
participants that you want to join.
So this just kind of breaks down what the initial story is.
Yeah.
And these things happen in the message feed of the lobby.
So you're hitting this part, by the way, when you're doing this. This is where this is where the start conversation message is being sent, dispatched right here in the domain state, because the domain now knows this person started a conversation with that person or
Yeah.
agent, whatever.
So there's a in between here. There's kind of a wait,
So
kind of
yeah.
like
So there's like a one-to-one
user
correspondence going on.
select. Well, actually, you don't need to select. This is what I was thinking earlier. You don't need to actually select an agent to talk to. By default, it's the lobby,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So-
to start a conversation, message will be the
We don't actually need agent list yet, or a conversation list yet. We don't need them. But let's say
sure. Okay. Okay.
um,
You're right. At this point, they don't exist.
it sends a message, and then like an agent views
Sent messages.
available agents and conversations. I don't know. I'm just.
Are
It's
you
a
going to do?
story.
Are you going
again.
to do it at once? Are you going to view two lists at once?
No.
Okay, so
No, I meant-
so separate them. Just repeat. Just do a repetition. I know it's this is the tedious part. It always is. Yeah, because then when you come back to it,
But
it's
this
going
what
to-
makes sense to you, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
When you come back to it, it's going to be so much easier to actually differentiate.
So this is our story we've got so far.
So there's three
And
screens.
All we needed was one screen to begin with, but then here's the second screen and the third screen.
So
lining
because
up
we
with our
have three
story.
screens, we need widgets on screens to connect
Mm-hmm.
the motions between them.
Right. Makes sense. Mm-hmm. So, you've got my interest.
All right. Well, let's dive into what your phone already does in existing apps, right? Like, this is a conversation system. So the easiest way to approach it is to look at what chats systems do. What is this is like the lobby interface, right? Like we're dropped into an actual channel.
Mm-hmm.
And this looks a lot like the conversation,
List.
either the conversation list or the agent list. Here it's blended
Mm.
in our
Yeah.
and future development is going to have conversations being agents, but that's not important right now. So so they would show up here as well, as far as if it's an agent screen.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is right now is finding a specific conversation screen that's not agents, or making a decision about that particular situation and going from there.
Can we take a break first?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I'm feeling it. I think we're gonna solidify some good screens here.
Did showing you the component functions help clarify the whole idea behind like taking some parameters into a function and spitting some markup out based on those parameters? It's just like so simple, hopefully. That's
I think
the
so.
end goal, right? Like is to just justify the simplicity and the ease of approach.
Yeah, it's nice that a lot of complexity gets abstracted away.
That you don't
That's
have to,
the idea.
That you don't have to
Basically,
jump
right?
into it, right?
And this is how you know you're speaking a good language stack, is when complexity gets abstracted away and you're just dealing with simplicity.
And it's not just getting abstracted away, it doesn't change over time so much anymore. Like, I don't have to find new ways of
Yeah,
gluing it
like
together
everything
anymore.
isn't always like an ad hoc ball of tape.
Right, like a very clear few paths, just glue layers needed to be refined and put it together.
Mm-hmm.
Because you generate your component based on the data you're given, right? Like, so it's always going to go that same route over and over and over again, no matter where it shows up.
Right.
Very controllable, manageable.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, I'm gonna hit a break here, and we'll be right back.
and you're going to have an API, like a set of available functions.
So the store is a bunch of objects that have come into the system.
Yeah, don't have to worry about how. That's the Redux part. Redux does all of it. You don't need to worry about how it's implemented. That's, again, my job.
Mm-hmm.
My job is to give you this one variable, a number of functions that you can say, okay, this function gets this information out of the store. This function gets that information out of the store. Just give you like a defined interface. How do you get a user? Get user, give it my store, it'll extract the user from the store. Don't worry about the details.
I'm not worrying.
No, I'm saying like I'm saying like for your mental model. The other thing is the widgets are going to be like, okay, create message this, create message that, create message this. Underneath all of the complexity for the UI, all of it'll result in is a situation where the store object is being asked to dispatch a message with whatever values you want. So all of the UX, all of the app data, all of this part feed into this part, and all it's doing is connecting it to these functions to get the data out, and to the dispatch function to push data in. Very uniform set of operations.
Cool.
So it's like a database to itself. This is your data. This is the thing that speaks app, or domain rather. App translates for domain.
So how does it connect with components?
You will have a component that is responsible for creating message types. So the system must create a message, send it to the system. It's going to have to know how to create that message. That's going to be fed back in. That's the information that this shit supplies. So like you have to have it in this schema. I need to have those values for that message.
Yeah.
That's how it connects. So it's like there's a mapping between the two parts.
Mm-hmm. I'm reminded of TypeScript and how the abstractions can become component seems like the word, but just that there's smaller pieces coming together to build bigger pieces, and that there's a regularity to that, which you at the user interface or the programming on the high end, you don't gain access to fuck things up below. It's already defined. You can only operate through that interface.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah,
like typescripting.
Yeah, and yet another way to constrain the direction of what's available. So, a programming language is a general programming language. It opens up the window to do anything, right?
Yeah.
The constraint part is to say, okay, yeah, cool. This is the way I actually intend to use the system. Please make sure I don't use it otherwise. Yeah,
if you want your language open up to anything, you can make any kind of arbitrary system or organization you want. But if you want your system to be
resilient, resilient. Look, immune.
If you want your system to interface with the possibilities of reality,
okay, yeah,
then you need to only be describing few constraints, actually a lot of constraints that really then opens you up into that possibility.
Yeah, like, because the constraints really, what they do is denote the next layer, right? Yeah. If you think about it, because the way this is working, like all of these constraints, they're saying that at the interface layer, you're just going to be sending messages. It's really narrowing down what you're going to be doing.
Yes, you can arbitrarily...
But how you send messages and what messages are just becomes an entire platform, right?
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of complex adaptive systems and ongoing evolution of such types of systems and how new layers emerge.
Well,
And
that's not an accident.
Our culture right now, using the market, for example, is like a kind of stopgap hack sort of method for opening up potential, but it also doesn't give a shit about so many things. Like, we can arbitrarily organize humans, but that doesn't mean everything's going to be well sustained and taken care of.
Usually never means that.
No, that's what I mean. So we've got this kind of really highly programmable social APS, I guess.
It's an OS. The APS part would be like the abstractions of it being a conversation and all the context switching and all of that shit, which dives into reflecting the APS itself.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
It's
OS,
more
fine,
reflective of it, but it's not it. I would say, you know.
Yeah, whatever. Wrong word. I do that all the time.
I'm a stickler for those kinds of details.
Do it all the time.
Me too. The other way around.
Right. Yeah. So that's why there's such a focus on constraints, because we do want that unlimited potentiality that's available in the so-called free market capitalism, or the market market economy, this kind of stuff. But we're simply trying to extend that complex adaptive system properly up into those social OS layers.
Yeah, and by being like really blended into the HTTP landscape, by being like a very standard RESTful sort of entity amongst RESTful other entities, it doesn't pose itself as like a unique different system. It doesn't present itself as like
What's REST again?
REST means representational state transfer. So
What?
Representational state transfer. So that means it's like, so the best way to describe it is to imagine the whole request response cycle on a server, and the request has to have all the information required to extract what the state is supposed to be, how to manipulate it, and then push it back. And so there's no actual state maintained between the request and response cycle itself.
On an overall picture, you're talking about the ability for different systems to understand where they're at in a program when they're communicating using that.
Mm-hmm.
To like whether it's you take an entire chain of history and reprocess an entire thing, now you're at a like latest state.
More simply, actually, imagine a completely foreign system talking to dashboard. The dashboard presents it with an API, a defined set of APIs. So the other system does not have to be dashboard itself. It can just talk to a dashboard using the APIs, the well-defined set of APIs. And so what this means is that all you really need is a client to talk to dashboards from any other foreign systems. And the dashboard wouldn't give a shit about the difference, because
But what is state transfer? Like, what the hell are you talking about?
That's an established concept.
Between
that
what
you can,
things is state being transferred, and why is state so important?
So that's like a
state between what?
That's a computer science subject, and if you look up wiki for REST, you will understand. You will get the actual laydown of all of that. I'm not like that versed. I can give you the gist of it.
That's all I was asking for.
So the gist of it is that you don't maintain state between client and you don't maintain any state on the server as a client talks to it. So it's the client's responsibility to basically say, okay, given this state as represented by my request to you,
so what you mean by that is
give me an answer.
The server, when it's running its programs,
it doesn't maintain state
it
between requests.
Takes in the exact input it's being given at that time,
Mhm.
processes it kind of dumb and then responds.
Yeah, so it doesn't have
And
an
then
ability.
forgets. Like
Yeah.
there's no other hidden variables keeping track of anything. It's all done on the
Yeah,
client.
so all of the state is being transferred across the request response cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Which
And-
doesn't happen on the client side, but is mimicked.
Okay, so now expand this concept. What is REST in our case?
REST is what's responsible for communication between the backend and the front end, which is where the specs come into play to make all the transformations for the way the data is transferred. So,
Okay.
RESTful object spec is like a raw
So okay, hold on.
representation given to the client.
Let me ask. Is the ideal that the state not be on the back end and that it's always on the front end, or was that an implication, or
It's more like state management and responsibility divisions. So
or there's different, each one has different types of states that it's keeping track
so
of
in the
potentially.
in the case of a server doing a request response cycle, like a true request response cycle, the Redux store gets built empty in every request, like fully empty. Request information is then used to figure out what to populate this database with.
Mhm.
Then the database is read by the application, and then data mutations have been recorded. All that gets synced back to wherever it got the information from, and all of that state gets lost. So it literally jumps into existence only for that one request. Next request comes in, a completely new store is being brought into place, synced with some kind of persistence layer to populate it. All of the data mutations requested performed, responses created, everything is synced back to an actual persistence layer, and the request becomes again, like as if nothing has ever happened. On the client side,
Yeah.
you'll keep that store going for as long as you need.
I'm getting vibes like the database end and the fundamental specs for the system are more static this way, because that's that towards alignment with the similar
Mhm,
idea, right?
You only
It just makes them
once you figure out the algorithms, it's only about tweaking them to be better at doing the same job that they're already doing.
yeah. I get it. And so
So the code doesn't actually
the
mutate
REST
a lot.
concept is something that just works with that.
So like incredibly well. Hence the choice. It's not a random. Hard to justify like with everything else like I've been talking about, like to put it into perspective. But becomes very easy once you understand what it is supposed to do. So in this case, the spec for RESTful objects is not just REST, but how to use an object schema to communicate, oh, this is an object of this type, it works this way, it has these actions, here's the links to go there, here's the links to go there, and you use REST to basically tell it where to go, and it just makes those requests and gets those state representations back out of the system without keeping any state on the server.
Mm-hmm.
So it just does that.
It's kind of like it sounds like you're defining the environment or the context, like with almost a script that just triggers a bunch of objects on the
Mhm.
server, and before you know it, the environment's there, and then run this data through it.
Yeah. So now that you have this well-defined shape given back to you through this REST representation, your job on the UX side will be to like consume everything that it's pointing to, and to like make decisions about like what that means. So in some cases it'll present you with the information and you'll build a form out of it. In some cases it'll be like a page for a feed. in some, you know what I mean? Like you're just using those bits of information that it keeps telling you how it's representing them based on the queries you're asking it of what to do. So your basic UX design becomes really, really dumb in that it just reads a set of pieces of data and reacts to them. And just goes, oh,
Okay,
if this
so-
then that, if this then that, if that then this, if this
So
then
let's
that.
say in your app, you are looking
Our app, come on.
just the general you, like, as one has an app, and you see a message feed. You're just in a default message feed, so you're seeing everything: agents, conversations, and messages, I guess.
Oh, a raw feed like
Feed.
that, yeah. Like that would be
Um,
like a most useless feed too. It's like a log. It would be a log.
Well, no, actually, I think, like agent join messages, you always see that in the feed, anyways. Like looking at traditional IRC.
Yeah.
And new conversation started. That would be like making a post to, like,
Totally.
sharing a link to a forum or something.
Totally.
So yeah, so what I was thinking is, if you right click on, let's say right click or hold
Yeah.
tap, you click hold tap on a message. When you go to view, depending on that object type, whether it was an agent that you just clicked on,
Mhm.
or whether it was a started conversation or just a general message to the lobby convo,
Yeah.
it's going to now pull you into an info view.
It's
Which,
relevant,
if it's
yeah.
an agent, it's going to have their picture
Profile,
icon,
yeah.
right? So that's your profile associated to
And
agent.
the conversation is the feed of the conversation. For example, if you click into it, you just get dumped into that
You
feed.
would jump into a new feed, a sub feed or something with like a new banner
Or
at,
like
at the top saying what.
Or if you're not a
conversation.
participant, for example, you could be jumped into like a request access
Yeah.
to the
Yeah, exactly, right.
permission to join.
So when you hold tap and like click to go in or whatever, it's gonna, the UI side of it's gonna determine what type of an object you just opened,
Mhm.
and that's what, like, template it's gonna open you
And
up.
that's a good-
And I don't know how to set those up.
So it's a good point, but you're also like describing where UI becomes like less one-to-one with the internal domain and more something of its own thing. It's going to have to
Sure.
like be like, if I'm a message of this type, I have to create this set of components to get the information out of the user and send it off, or I can do it automatically, or I can do the, you know what I mean?
Use
So-
defaults.
Yeah, so it's going to start to like take in all of that data, make its own decision, create its own state to keep track of those decisions, and not communicate much of it back until the final process is done or something like that. So there's going to be like state maintained
Yep.
between the initiation of some action, and the UI states that get all of the information into the actual final dispatch.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So like there's a difference between the state that's maintained in the UI, which is like, is the form field valid? What's the error message? Right? Like,
So, like, do we want to actually write this down?
oh yeah, this is called UI state. It's this part. So anything that's touching the React front end, so we're past the refined stuff, we're past the back end stuff, we're strictly back down to like raw React land now.
Mm-hmm.
Anything there, it's anything there is going to have its own state management logic. That's what I was saying.
Cool. So for this, I'm kind of thinking that we should just maybe pull a few of these segments and
Yep.
just put it at the end of the document and just start over with a few simple pages.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that way we don't lose the work.
So, okay, I'll just grab a few of these.
Yeah, give me your management. I'll be right back.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing this pretty much all week, so
Nice.
don't expect too much sympathy. It's such a fucking pain in the ass. I
Sure.
Does the phrase "it's more simple than it sounds" ring true at all? Like, does that sense come up at all?
I know, man. Don't worry about it.
Well, I do worry about it because I need that fucking simplicity to be
We've talked
evident.
many times about how that works. That the
It takes many words to get a simple concept across.
yeah, something like that. How you doing over there?
I could use another one after.
Okay.
It really does, doesn't it? Like, the more simple the idea is, the more fucking words it needs. Because you start to veer off into all of
I
these
wonder
edge
if it's
cases. You know?
smarter to talk about it as like using a holonic system of organization.
That wouldn't appeal to.
I know, but you know what I'm saying, right?
Soon. Yes, and soon. But not now, because this part needs to be raw tech. And the reason is because this is the way it's going to actually be hidden in plain sight. Like, all of this is going to, like, literally be that client conversation I mentioned. All you need to know from another end to talk to a dashboard is a client, right? So it's like nothing has to know it's talking to dashboards, but behind the scenes, it's just another system out there. It's basically gonna be like totally hidden in plain sight. It's like, oh, the Golden Grail.
Yeah, man.
Holy Grail, Holy Grail.
So I copied 3 windows, 3 screens, and
Yeah, we don't need broadcast. We don't even need the title conversation.
I know, but I'm just leaving boxes available if we want to put stuff in them or whatever.
Okay.
This
So
is all
pretend
presumed.
they're not there.
Presumed it's wiped out, and we'll use whatever seems good.
GitHub has a diagramming language ability, so you could potentially transfer.
Sure.
I'm not sure if you can do wireframes, but if so, there's a way to draw all of this in GitHub pages for actual diagramming.
Yep.
That would be fucking sweet to do.
Sure.
Because then we can use them as a source of truth. I did bring my shit. Oh, yeah, you do have it.
One step at a time. What shit? Oh, yeah.
That shit.
Yep. I think we already did that.
So yeah, whenever you see the word query, you can be sure that no state has been changed in the effort of obtaining the information from
Yeah.
the query. Whenever you have a mutation,
Except for tracking your queries.
well,
like the government.
those are mutations.
Government's tracking your queries,
You
bro.
can always mutate other data when you're doing a query on this data. So it's an auxiliary thing, right?
Sure.
And we're going to use a lot of that because this is an evented system. So most of the data changes will be like, oh,
Almost incidental.
I've been sent a lot
Or
bunch of these
accidental.
events. I've been sent a bunch of these events. They cause these state changes. Okay, let's do the state changes. Is it all successful? Send more events to say it's successful. Send more events to say there was an error. So there's just going to be like events spawning events, spawning events, spawning events.
Yeah.
And every time you have a mutation, you'll have queries associated with what the fuck changed. And
Makes sense.
all of that can be given a granular interface. So you say, to query for this state, use this function. To query for that state, use that function. If you need to fix something, you're going to fix it in that fucking function. You're not going to... That's... and
Okay.
that's
So-
the layout.
I feel like there's always context to add. There's always more explanations. And sometimes, always, at least for me, I notice, the hardest thing is like to get right down to the exact business of what needs to be done. It's almost like a procrastinating feeling to it, but also that we realize that context needs to be added.
It's hard to develop components that are so dead simple without constantly jumping back into the context from which they have spawned off.
Yeah, so essentially
and
like
mixing
this,
that in. And mixing
what do you
that
call
in.
this? Like this runtime strategy is what we are doing in our own investigations of Portal Mountain, in our own developments of these apps and products, is we are having a core idea which keeps coming back to itself.
Yeah.
And saying, is it better now? What
And
else
also,
can we do?
And also a few constraining methodologies to like remove
So-
unnecessary context. So
That's
the-
interesting that the architecture of what we're programming follows along with kind of macro behaviors of what we are doing.
Well,
Like
that's,
the feedback process, right? Feedback protocol.
I think it'd be more interesting if it was unexpected. But because it was always meant to be a social OS reflection, it kind of falls in line with that expectation, right? You would
Yeah,
say.
man.
Because it has to like do the parallel, and the parallel isn't being holonic and then all of that kind of stuff that a lot of this is alluding to, right? Because if you look at the setup, right, if it's just like, oh, I'm going to grab it from a DB or an API, well, I'm talking about like grabbing it from an exactly the same URL on another dashboard. So all you're going to do is trigger exactly the same behavior downstream, right? Causing it to be an actual hold-on. So it's almost like very inherent in the way it's built up that it's going to not only be a self-contained unit, but also in an environment of exactly the exact same units. And whatever isn't that unit being using the client pretends to be a unit and doesn't matter. So it connects with the world and itself and everything all
Yeah,
at
so
once.
again, this is that holonic organization, holonic architecture. And it's sort of what I'm reminded of now is that where the code is executing, it's like every point in the web has its own perspective
And purpose.
to which it's calculating.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It has its own.
Yeah.
Is fully.
And we're localizing that. So here we only do that kind of process because that's the correct process for web processing in that point. Right? We're standardizing on that front. We're saying like, okay, yeah, right now you can do willy-nilly, whatever, but we're building such a constrained protocol that it's like you do utilize it exactly as is, but now you have a higher layer negotiating what the fuck it's talking about to begin with. And it does it consistently.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a repurposing, not even repurposing, it's like utilizing the technology for exactly what it was meant to do.
Yeah, it's kind
for
of
its higher
surprising that
layers.
you don't see a lot of other projects out there.
Well, they stopped building the stack, right? They stopped the OSI stack ended at application, and it just doesn't go beyond that, which means application could be any fucking thing. What we're saying is that no, it needs to be this exact thing, so that the layering architecture continues.
Can we create a chart for that? Let's say a continuation of the OSI model. That could be powerful visual.
I don't know what would entail in the diagram right now.
I think it's like our APS language stack and this tech stack. There's got somewhere in there. There's got to be like, this is how you continue the OSI model.
That's not a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'm prepped for this right now.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Nobody's a pro overnight.
But here's a cool thing is like, because we're using a spec to like transfer all the object information in a very specific way, when it's being read by the UX engine that you'll be creating, basically, it's always going to know like, okay, if I have this object, I can make these calls to get this information out of it, right? Like it's just going to know, because it's already self-oriented.
So what you're telling me is that what I'm hearing is that when I'm programming within this environment or utilizing the environment, I have in my environment access to a number of objects. The objects have properties.
Mm-hmm.
Those are well known and defined and can be viewed. And this is my interface that I use to talk down to the more fundamental layers.
Yeah, and you
correct?
And you take this object and you basically distill what its information it's providing you, and you're like, okay, I use this information to create this tag, I use this information to create that tag, I use this information to create these classes in the tag, on and on and on and on it goes. And it's like now a one single unified processing unit that you reutilize for this purpose, for that purpose, and you just feed it this object, the other object, the third object, and it just knows how the fuck to do it. Ultimately, based on the information you read out of it, and that's all you're going to be doing, like using a standard.
Well, this is a dashboard, basically, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, the name
the objects
isn't
themselves. What you're describing, like
the name
right
itself
here?
it's in the name.
Yeah. It has to eat its own dog food.
But like, it's exciting in the same sense as like, even when you have these concerns, right? Like, oh, I'm just going to get a standard object, and if it's this kind of an object, I know I can do this to it. And if that kind of an object, like for example, what about object type objects? So the schema that describes the objects that you can import into your system. Well, shit, they're objects. That means they have a very standard set of properties that you can utilize to build out your interface, because they're fucking objects. They come back to you as the same fucking thing over and over and over again. So is it an action? Is it a broadcast? Is it a message? Is it a this? Is it a that? Always comes to you as an object, and always you distill based on that object's information what the fuck to do with it. And the state of the UI. So if you're editing, it's a form. If you're not editing, it's
in other words,
the preview.
An object on an input as you read it is the object and its properties and every value for every property.
Yeah, and it's
That's
going to have
basically-
a,
that's
and it's
what it
going to
is.
have a spec attached to it, and you, based on that spec, you did make all of your decisions. So your functions, the ones that you were foreseeing doing, is going to take a little bit of input in, make some really dumb algorithmic decisions, and spit a whole bunch of markup out based on the values that it gets from those objects.
Mm-hmm.
So your state is totally managed for you. You're just given it, and you're like, okay, how do I display that state? How do I display this state? How do I display this state? You don't worry about like anything outside of your tiny little context.
Yep.
Like
Good.
the most you need to worry about is like, what do I do if the information in my input field is changing while the user is typing? Should I send a request to a higher level to maybe do something with the new information? You're so isolated in your component that nothing matters almost. And if you need to test it in isolation, you just like feed it fake state from above, from wherever you're testing.
Mm-hmm.
This is why testing is like such an important element of this, because then you create your component, you create all of your scenarios in which this component is used, and then you can be totally sure that when you plug that fucker in, everything is being fed it can handle.
Yeah, because the only things that will be fed are those more fundamental
Whatever
object
it
types,
needs.
the spec itself.
So like an object might have a property, but the property component does not need the object. It needs the fucking properties information only. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just going to be dumb enough to like only investigate the very tiny little piece of the thing it's concerned with.
Mm.
And the more that's solidified, the less the code will change. And everything will be moved to the runtime. And it's gonna be improvements
Nice,
only.
yeah. Nice paradigm.
Yeah, fuck man. Like that whole making it so simple that there's the image of the deer caught in the headlights is kind of funny to me because of the I can see the simplicity of what I'm asking for from other people. Like so it's not going to be that, but to watch like the person to try and navigate that
Dude.
mental block.
Dude, imagine that mental block is a metaphor for us, yes, adjusting this document right now, or us not adjusting it.
Oh no,
The document is staring at you like a deer in the headlights.
the comment isn't so much about like the wrong or right about the situation.
Yeah, I
It's-
get it.
I am
I get it.
personally amused by it to an extent.
I'm just extending that focus back to our efforts here.
Oh no, it's happening.
So I've made
No doubt there.
three screens. And
And they're all feeds, right?
so I just copied the same, they look the same so far.
So where are the screens similar? Where are they different? And where can we put some kind of UX to navigate between them? I think those
Yeah.
are the questions that we need to formulate to answers to get the picture together.
Right.
Because some parts don't change, some parts do.
So again, this story, an agent joins a lobby and sends a message. This is supposed to be able to be done on one single screen, like represented,
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yes.
right?
So that means opening the app, typing message in, hitting send. Right? So it should be this.
Yeah.
It should be this. So, check this out.
Is that like button to make it thing go down?
I just want to like demo it
Checking.
in real time.
Okay.
So it should be this. Open the app.
Yeah. Click
Law.
on your
Law.
message text box where you type in stuff.
Keyboard comes up. You type, you send. Messages in lobby. Alright, that you just saw the screen for that. It should not be any different than that. There's no other complexity.
Mm-hmm.
Alright. MVP first screen.
Yeah, so we can just focus on this screen. And
that only. That and only that.
so for now, let's ignore this top one. Default conversation. So list of ongoing. Was this the actual one? There's one where we want to be viewing the feed, right? The feed view.
And that's exactly the first screen.
That's what we're after, yeah. List of conversations.
So this involves a query.
I'm not sure if I've completely developed this.
This involves at least one query from here and one mutation to be implemented here to allow a message to be sent to the lobby. So we have to be able to dispatch a single type of message to the lobby.
Yeah.
And that has to be implemented.
Right. Cool.
Just looking at all of the layers of the stack, we have to have this accommodated.
Okay.
Because I'm also planning my own development cycle, right?
Default conversation. Okay, so this is, I have to change this.
That's fine.
Oops.
It's supposed to be iterative.
So this is, I don't want to delete the whole thing.
There is an implication here. The lobby itself acts as a conversation, which means objects of it are going to be available in that reference.
Yeah, so...
But don't worry about that now. It's not going to be implemented now. Just like a mental picture.
I think there's got to be some kind of header title area, like we would see
The
in
name of the
Telegram.
conversation that will allow it to be listed, yes.
Or conversation. Name of lobby or conversation.
Just anything to identify it, yeah.
The idea being if you go into a conversation, at the top that banner is going to now have the name title of that conversation. And maybe not just an icon.
But also
of the
in a
lobby.
like if you're looking at a list of conversations, you need some kind of name, right? To
Mhm.
reference.
Right.
Same shit.
So this would come up in multiple spots potentially. So we've got that, and then we're straight into
Participants. Who are the requested? So we have an initiator, which is one of the participants.
Okay, that's actually a different window, isn't it?
No, it's just the data points that are maintained by a conversation. So if you create a conversation object, it's going to like be created with your dashboard identity, right? Which we can skip for now. It's
Right.
going to be with your agent identity, which we can also skip for now. And it's going to be like conversation identifier, which we can skip for the lobby. But keep in mind, those are going to be data points that are necessary for other messages. So we can skip a whole bunch of stuff, and we can say, okay, we are only really interested in timestamp and content of the message, because we know where all the other details are coming from. They're hard-coded at this
Of which particular message?
the content. We would want the multimedia content of the message, so markup basically. Because you want messages to be able to hold pictures, sounds, whatever, right? So the content body is just a multimedia body. In other words, HTML.
So we call this feed though?
Content. No, it's the okay. I see what you're saying. reference to the messages themselves. And I'm dumb thinking about So, in my head, I was designing the message object, not the conversation object when I said that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the discrepancy. So feed
Cool,
would
yeah.
feed would be like a reference to the array of messages pertaining
Yeah.
to the conversation, and that array is determined by reference to this conversation. So it's a relationship, a database.
Yeah, there's like kind of a parent conversation is the lobby itself at the very least.
Sure, and that points to the fact that we have to implement a lobby as conversations.
The default conversation, sort
Well,
of.
it plays into how dashboards are lobbies, are conversations, are agents. Like all of these objects are like different views of the same damn thing.
Okay, so we're just kind of we're imagining this message feed thing. So far,
if
I'm
you-
starting from the top. I don't know about anything below.
If you wanna indicate a subtype, so a feed is like a type of something, but
Yeah.
of what? You do this. That's a universal syntax in the type systems.
With a space, presumably.
No. You
Don't do a space.
it's like a function call, but with types. So you're saying a feed is not itself the full object that you're referencing.
Sure.
It's a feed of messages, because it can have a feed of agents, a feed of.
Fine.
So whenever you do that delineation, you're saying this isn't incomplete. It's a type template. Well, I'm already saying
Yeah.
that in the syntax.
It's fine.
Instead of messages, just use the variable name messages. Feed
I get
message
it. I'm just adding
messages.
a. No, hold on. Like just.
you use established protocols. No,
There.
no,
It's
no.
a comment.
It's useless. And comments also are a pain in the ass when they're not done right.
I did it perfect, man.
No. This. You want this. You're labeling the type of the variable, and the variable
Yeah, okay,
as
fine.
how it's going to be referenced. You're creating a protocol.
Okay, so anything else here is potentially from a totally different screen.
Some kind of metadata, sure. Yeah.
Right where this ongoing conversations, that's going to be another screen. Basically, that's our conversation list.
Remember your confusion about Refine's role in all of this? It's metadata.
No, I've just never heard of all this shit.
I know.
I'm not confused. I'm
No,
just ignorant.
Purpose. Confused with purpose, like where it's going to fit in. I'm saying it's going to do stuff like provide some metadata, aka permissions, authentication, any of that stuff that's normally not thought of as part of the normal happy path of the request. It's just a metadata of it, like the headers that you sent with the actual body. It does all of that work behind the scenes.
So, need I remind you, as this document develops, that is our concrete metric for success in progress.
The reason I mention that it's important is because when you're filtering your message feed, for example, well, guess what? You're going to have access permissions, right? What's going to drive that? It's going to be that system, which at the moment is just going to return true for everything. False for negatives, right? Like if you don't have access, it's a false. But if it's true, you have access. So initially, all of that is just authentication, true. Permission, true. Like no matter where you go. But this whole filter in business is going to eventually be affected by it. Okay. You're just still going to work with the data you get that is available to you, so you don't really need to worry.
There has to be a text input area.
Yep.
Let's call it input area.
Message input area. We want to know what we're inputting.
Message.
Well, we don't want to like it could be a conversation input area, and then like what the fuck does that mean?
Conversation is a message. See, it's simple.
Yeah, but you're creating it in this interface, or what the fuck? See, then it's not that simple. The fact of the domain does not translate to the facts of the interface.
So there's like a send button.
Yep.
Okay, making progress here, buddy.
Usually these go above. Like
Above what?
you'd wanna. This is where. So
This is our feed right here.
usually look. You have your feed,
Yeah.
and then message and.
Yeah, it's at the bottom.
Well, I guess you're. No, I guess you're mimicking this
Yeah.
fairly well.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need the emoticon stuff because it's part of the message input area.
Yeah. And I don't know, this is
We can't-
conversations or
we-
searching.
Yeah, we can't do that yet in this interface, so maybe just
We don't need that,
Yeah.
I think.
take it out. And voila! We has screen one!
Look at that.
Screen one!
Time to celebrate. With a washroom break. It is a joyful occasion, yep. Sure is.
interface that we've built is limited to one single dispatch for mutation. Send message, right, to the lobby. And its content is like the simplest possible can be, markup. So the functionality is so very limited, is that the only action this app does is send a message to itself. I mean, it's totally useless as an actual application. Don't get me wrong, but as a proof of concept of every
Well,
element,
that's not the
from
point.
from interface to server to
The point is of this. I think it's atomic design.
yeah.
The methodology or the strategy is to find the simplest possible starting point that you can be concrete, and then start patching on different components, essentially different screens, different templates.
And every time you do that, you reiterate: do my atoms satisfy all of the needs of all of my molecules, for example?
Right.
Do I need a new atom to satisfy this molecule, or is this like a variant of another situation? So that atomic design piece becomes what's known as a design system. So the design system is like the overarching mental model about how to think about what components are, why they are the way they are, what that information is for, the way they look. All of that stuff becomes like a separate thing, the design system.
Design system. It almost sounds like a generic way of saying just the straight map
Yep.
of the domain.
Yep. So the beauty of the setup that I've actually created for us is that storybook bit where you get to like write stories about other components.
Right.
Well, that actually becomes the design system. So when you want to know what the design system is, you go back to the storybook and you look up all of your components and how they're to be used.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a back and forth. So you're not only
Makes sense,
you're
yeah.
not only creating an app.
That's
you're
great for
creating-
onboarding people.
Oh.
The tutorial kind of.
You got it. You got it. There's so much effort that needs to be put into documentation. It's going to be ridiculous.
Yeah, and it should be there.
But the project, the org I've set up has a project documentation website available to it. It has the wiki, it has the discussions, it has the project management stuff associated with it, code spaces, any of that stuff. So basically any moving piece that you can possibly imagine about it is now self-contained all as well. That's what I've been really focused on last week. And then since then creating a bunch of wikis for
Right.
the domain itself.
Yeah, so it sounds like you were saying, like kind of version 1 of the polyverse spec is out, sort of. Like there's enough there to like get an idea of the stack top to bottom.
Yeah.
How it connects everywhere.
Like, you can take this picture, look at the documentation, and if you have enough capacity to like tech understanding, like imagine you've read the documentations for this, that, and the other thing that's mentioned here,
Sure, yeah.
and you understand it. Like if you read this and you read that, you'd be like, okay, that's where we're going with this.
Yeah. I like the idea of onboarding. It should be easy as possible. And like this work that you've been doing recently to like architect the different projects that are out there already, how they connect together and into what giant purpose.
And to not repeat any of that shit.
Yeah.
And the swappable element too. Remember, you can swap React, you can swap Redux, you can swap Refine, you can swap Router.
Right, but those projects are filling a slot. Though.
Right, they're proof of concepts. They're already doing exactly what we need to do.
So what we need
and
to
we don't
do
have
then
alternatives.
is ideally would be to this tech stack that you've mapped out here. Ideally would be to take these slots and rename them as a more generic name. Like you've got this component, that component, maybe router is already a generic thing that fits there.
Yeah.
But instead of using the word refine or react,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
this is your front end.
Yes, that is the goal. I use them right now so that we have reference points as to what the fuck those pieces are even going to provide.
But this would be a next step for documentation purposes, which I bet you may not have done actually, but to kind of generify those role slots
Yes.
that these packages are filling
Uh,
in documentation, to say generically what it's supposed to do, and then say, okay, well, React does this most of the way, but it doesn't do this perfect, doesn't do that perfect.
how much of this can I do right now without confusing the very living shit
Yeah.
out of any newcomer?
Right. Well, it might help though. I don't
Yeah.
know.
It's a side segue, right?
Mhm.
It's like, okay, yeah, but we're doing this first.
You can always.
Then we will document that too.
Yeah, side
Because like honestly, all we need to do for say the React, for the React piece is basically be like, okay, we're no longer importing anything from React anymore. We're just important from this generic name. But
Yeah.
generic name, all it's doing is forwarding everything React. So I mean, yeah, we can do that now.
Sure, like an
but
alias.
why?
No, you don't have to. Of course, but that's
It's
you get the
complica-
point.
it's
Is
complicated
to
shit. React
Um,
should be thought of as the model for
Okay.
the JSX driver.
let me clarify the purpose of doing such a thing. It would be that you could have a document which is, say, how to implement the polyverse, or how to bootstrap the polyverse, how to, what do you call it, how to deploy the polyverse. So you have a how to deploy the polyverse document, and it's not going to talk about React this or whatever. It'll say these packages are available, but you're going to describe each slot that's being filled, right? That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So how to deploy the polyverse document, that's where you would have those generic type
Yeah.
of names for the slots.
And really, I'd rather deploy the polyverse first and then describe how to deploy it. Do you know what I mean? So before that point,
Yeah,
I can assume it.
yeah, yeah.
We can
And
assume it, and we can just know that.
These packages all take a historical sort of significance,
Yes.
if you will. Like, this is the history of the polyverse.
React is just really well fucking built. Okay, like it works fucking amazingly for exactly the purpose it's built for. It's slick,
Don't have
slim.
to convince me.
It's slick, slim, easy to understand, and once you get into it, it's just like it makes fucking sense. And it keeps the entire constraint element that we need at bay.
Yeah. So, I think eventually Portal Mountain or related polyverse assets, I'm imagining like a computer programming boot camp type thing, you know, like where just people get together as like guilds, various guilds.
When the programming part does not actually matter and only the social components are the only at play, that's when we have completed the full circle though. So when it's about the gardening guild, not about the programming
Right.
guild.
But imagine how important being able to program like that is
That's the computation guild.
for setting up organizations, right?
Well, it is. There's a
Really?
slot for it. It's the computation guild, which is like literally responsible for setting dashboards up.
Like domains. Domains for agents to work through.
Well, yeah, the dashboard will take care of a domain somehow. Because it's going to be an assortment of objects in that domain. And it can transpose it, it can do whatever the fuck else it wants with it. Recalculating. Just like the feeds, right? Recalculating.
Right.
So we need a feed. We need an input text element.
Is this good enough? Do we have? What about on this screen somewhere? There's going to be how to connect to at least to the other window screens. We
Less.
don't have to put it there yet.
No, it's later.
But you're gonna need an agent list and a conversation list.
Eventually, we'll need some form of way to get to that, right? But not as a first screen. First screen,
Right.
you gotta send a message to the lobby that doesn't require any of that.
Sure.
We can get away with basically just implementing literally this.
What if we just put them at the top here?
Just pick. Hold on.
Just 2 buttons at the top somewhere.
There won't be a conversation list. There won't be an agent variant. Look at the screen. Take out the arrow. Take out the dot dot dot. Take out the pinned. That's all you're seeing. You're
Yeah.
seeing Portal Mountain Lobby. How many members? 1. Some kind of avatar. The profile of the person whose dashboard it is.
Right.
Feed all of the messages from
So-
exactly that same person.
Conversation isn't a thing in
No.
this, really.
No.
Agent list, you have to tap and hold on the title to get the agent list,
Maybe.
right?
We don't know. We don't know yet. Title. So we don't need those 2 boxes at the
Yeah.
top whatsoever. So
I'll
title,
just leave it there.
feed of message, input area, send, done. Bare bones chat message window
Yep.
you can possibly imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Useless as fuck. But exactly what we need.
Right?
And contained, self-contained.
Simple.
Exactly.
Okay.
Let's if we can, I'm gonna do some research. Maybe you can do some research. There's a diagramming language called Mermaid. It's basically a way to embed shit like this into a markdown document that's very GitHub friendly. So in the documentation site, we can create pages for screens that we're going to actually go by, or in whatever GitHub repository. It doesn't fucking matter. Really doesn't matter where, in Wiki or I don't know exactly where shit belongs.
That's fine. So we've got this screen, and where do we go from there? How do we componentize?
So each
So
square.
let's do components.
Yeah, each square is just a function. So you'll have header, title, or whatever as your component name. You'll have your feed message, or just a feed component that takes in a list of messages and displays them. It doesn't have to work. It just has to exist. Right? Like
Yeah.
it could just like send out an empty UL markup. It doesn't fucking matter. What's important is what's going to be important is that we identify the atoms and the molecules and the pages, and we'll deal with the template part after the fact. There's 4 stages to
Okay.
atomic design, so we need to create atoms. We then need to combine them into molecules. We need to run them through a template to give it a layout, and then we need to give it a page to give it a final look. I don't like the term page.
Templates,
Template.
atoms, molecule, and
Templates, pages is the normal nomenclature. I hate the word pages because it
Okay.
implies totality. But really, it's going to be a widget that's can be further put on into another layout and recursively. But page is like the final stage where you have like your final output of the component in the
Okay,
layout.
so let's do it then. Let's
The send button is an atom.
wait. Why don't we start at the top? Title.
Oh, okay. Titles are atoms.
Title.
Titles is an atom.
Title is like a property, isn't it?
Yeah, but a representation of a title is an atomic element on a page.
Right?
So we're not talking about what it is in the data model. We're talking about what it is in the UX. So markup. We're just talking markup.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have
In terms of
markup
how
to
things are
display
laid
titles.
up, the different areas of the screen.
Yeah, we're gonna have a markup to display the title. We're gonna have a markup
Feed.
to display the feed.
Input box.
Capitalize your components, by the way.
What if I don't want to?
Well, React's gonna be a bitch.
Send. Oh, damn.
Send is more of a button. So the atom would be a button. Send might be a molecule. What are we sending? Where do we get the content from?
Okay.
So the send
Send
mechanism
is like a more function.
Yeah. So think about the markup only.
So, but what, like
No. Call it send button.
send button?
Yeah, for now.
Okay. That's
Because
the
it's
area.
very concrete. It's just concrete right now. We're not talking about the abstractions behind it. We're just talking about, look, what the fuck are we seeing on the screen? Those are the components. The feed, the input, the send button,
Mm-hmm.
all following each other in a sequence.
Yep.
Look at your atoms and see if anything can be combined into a single unified unit. Those are your molecules.
Yeah.
Right now, I don't see any, personally.
Well, how when you click send, it combines with the message input area to put something in the feed.
What would you,
Isn't that
what do you
combining?
call? What would you call that? That has to have a name now. What would you call this whole composition?
Like message send.
You're looking at a component on screen.
I don't know. You tell
Well,
me.
no,
Fine.
No,
you
no, no,
lead.
no. This is I can't tell you because this is the exercise. It's the same for me as it is for you. We have to come up with a name. If we think that this needs to be
But
combined
so-
into a molecule,
So you're
then we need to
agreeing that it's
justify.
valid what I said, or what?
It could be valid if we can justify the next phase. How do we call it? How does it interact with the rest of the world as a single unified thing? It has to be something to be referenced. What is its reference? And it can't be just like a generic
I don't know.
abstraction.
Let's just forget about it, and if it comes up later,
Fine.
then
Precisely.
we'll have to add it.
You caught the very, very significance of that discussion. Not now. Could be,
Hmm.
potentially, maybe later, yes. Does it mean anything now? No.
But you're talking about molecules, right? So
Well, molecules.
None.
We don't get any.
fine.
So that means that our templates we can skip
Why?
because we're going to be hard coding them for the time being.
So our template is like,
Hard coded.
oh, yeah, it's just like a linear display, linear
Yeah.
output of variables or whatever.
What we're interested in is in the pages, right? Which is basically taking our atoms, molecules, and putting them into a layout that's hard coded
Yeah.
into the final product. So basically, we don't want to arrive at at the final markup until we send it through a templating function, which is just going to, at the moment, forward exactly what it gets
Well,
straight up.
Probably a lot of like template, or I'm thinking like different devices. Like if it's a desktop, it's going to look a lot different than
That's
mobile.
That's what it's going to
Like the
play.
high level.
That's literally what it's going to play into.
Like-
And it's also going to take care of things like, am I looking at the edit form? Am I looking at the preview form? Am I looking at the actual thing? So it's going to decide as to whether to display in the same layout, for example, whether to display a form field or the content of the object itself without any capacity for editing.
Okay. So we've got.
So a template is right now the template is basically a direct forwarder. So whatever the template gets as arguments, it sends back out exactly as is. It's not going to modify anything.
That's why I figured in like a browser output window, you would just see a linear output of the process. It just gets spit out like a log, right?
Effectively, yeah. So for the time being, templates are basically not none, but no op.
No op.
None. No op. NOOP. It means it forwards its input exactly as it receives it. It doesn't do anything through it.
Yeah.
It's just a dumb processor that
Good.
doesn't do anything. Pages is what we get as a result. A page in this lingo refers to the final component product that could be potentially stuffed into another page, and so on. Right? The lingo doesn't match
Sure.
from the spec, but the concept is literally like the final product. So what we're looking for in terms of like the page is
Yeah.
literally a self-contained, complete, unified component that you can use in your storybook to display how it works. A page in storybook. That's what we'll relegate that to. So it's
Mhm.
utilizing the same concept, but it's just like making sure that it doesn't bleed into a different aspect of our domain. So
Confusing. Confusing.
I hate this word. I didn't choose it. It's just the way that
Yeah.
the
We'll
standards
revisit that.
presented when you read about it outside of my
We can
lecture.
revisit that later.
So when you look at atomic design, you're going to come across pages.
Okay, so
As
why
a-
don't
as a
we?
term.
So basically, the atoms are all that we have to come back to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Shall we?
No, we don't have none for molecules.
What do you mean?
Well, we have one molecule that combines all the atoms together into one single screen. Right? So those are the atoms, but the thing that surrounds them is the
Mhm.
molecule, and we
Sure.
only have one of them, and that's the screen. I don't know if we're gonna call it the screen, but for now we can call it the screen.
Okay, good catch. Good catch. I thought you weren't gonna get that. I was testing you.
Uh-huh.
Good catch.
So yeah. We have one molecule, a bunch of 4 atoms. We have a no-op template, which means basically it doesn't actually introduce any logic to the situation. And then we have the page, which is really the component. And if you'd like, we can change this language for our own sake.
Sure.
And
Components.
this phase of atomic design should really be recursive. Page doesn't suggest you recurse back into the
Right.
system.
Okay.
Component will suggest that.
Nice.
Like once you get
Ta-da!
once you get your final product, you can actually embed it into another cycle of atoms and
Okay.
the molecules.
So does this help us bridge to the front end React stuff, as in components, or does that?
Oh yeah. So
helps?
once you arrive at the component phase and you have your component, guess what it is? It becomes its own atom,
Sure.
and therefore recurses back into the system.
Yeah. So why you would call that a page? That's disgusting.
Yeah.
If that was available.
Well,
to you
because
to,
they're
like,
not
hint-
talking about
hint back.
holonic design and they're not thinking about like
Fuckers.
recursive systems at all. But if we add the recursivity into fucking words,
Recursivity.
yeah, into it, you can understand why like what their concept of a full page
Recursion.
becomes like more like another atom in this into the same
Yeah, obviously. So that
replicating
makes
system.
this have more relevance.
Yeah. So, side note, when you read any atomic design documentation out there in the world, they will absolutely refer to it as page.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
weird. That's hokey.
It's because they don't think like we do.
Hmm.
No up for now, by the way.
Fine.
Can you add ATM? No op ATM at the moment to the document. That way
Isn't
it's
that
documented.
like a sexual position?
It's also machine to extract money.
ATM. Anyways, yeah. Not trying to get banned off YouTube or nothing.
Pretty sure it's a machine you extract money from.
Yep. That's what we're talking about. Yeah, we're still streaming.
Anyway, done. Got the components, got the actual thing. We have 4 atomic function components, 1 molecule function component.
Okay.
All can be just like created as functions by name and return fucking nothing. They don't have to return anything. You can use that process to like do it step by step is what I'm saying. Get an HTML button that's displaying. Combine it all
Sure.
together, whatever, like whichever part of those components you want. Just
So
modify
you're-
this function, that function, the other function,
You're talking
and your
about
interface will build itself.
This was the next thing that we were like I was thinking to list. Don't we then get so we've got these 4 atoms and
Mhm.
1 molecule, so that's 5 things potentially to have their own component.
Yeah, no,
Right.
exactly. So each atom is a component.
Yeah.
And I told you to titleize them because that's how components just work in React. So there's
That's fine. And you're just saying that
you have title function, a feed function, input box function, send button function,
this could
a
be
screen function.
iterated using like a component template of like what we saw with the Hello World, but
Mhm.
just have nothing, and then that's like getting you one step closer. Because of what does that do? So title, it's gonna pull the current lobby, whatever like your object. There's gonna be a lobby object. You're gonna pull its title, or it's a conversation object. That's your focus. You'll pull the title. That's what's gonna be returned, and this is the function.
Yeah. And each component is going to have a context from which it's working. And the context is going to be supplied to it from the upper layers of the system. So it's not going to have to figure out how do I retrieve the title for myself if I'm this component. It's just going to be like, oh, I'm a component. What's my title? It's going to be given to it.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Like it's going to be contextualized to that information.
Yep.
So it doesn't need to actually like figure out. So check this out. So you can picture those as like HTML tags, right? In their own right. Take them.
Sure.
Take them as is.
Like sections.
Yeah, take them as is, and imagine like all that screen does is create a div tag around these tags.
Yeah.
Like takes those as is and transpose. And that's the only thing a molecule is doing.
It's a container.
It's like looking at what's my catalog of atoms? Okay, surround them in this overarching whatever architecture and list them out.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it's going to do. So the molecule is actually just when you have your atoms, all you're going to do in your molecule is like, okay, just take my molecules and take my atoms and list them one by one. Cool. I have my molecule. Just present that as a full
Yeah.
screen.
It's I guess it seems like a shortcut.
Composition.
You can call the screen and up comes all the atoms.
Right, because the screen is just saying I'm composed of this atom, this atom, this atom, this atom, this atom, this atom, this atom.
Sure, yeah.
So right now we're putting the screen in the molecule, but eventually what we want to do is go through the template system and create a full-blown page. But because templates is a no-op, it's just going to return you the exact same molecule back out, right? So you have your molecule.
No.
You apply it to a template.
Like I don't really get like what's even all that template. Like what is a template doing?
So a molecule is.
I assume it has to do with arrangement somehow.
Yes, a molecule is like a parent that holds a reference to children of the things that it's composed of.
Yep.
A template is supposed to take this molecule, look at those children, and transform them into an entire layout. So it's like a translation function. The result of this transformation gives you what is called the page, or the final component that we're actually after. But because because the templating function is no-op, the final component we get after is exactly the same thing as the molecule we put into it.
So I think a thought that came to my head is that this example is too simple in that these atoms don't really have subatoms, and like our page isn't that complicated yet. Like it's going to grow into that, and once you get into that, then I feel like
it's going to be way more relevant.
More sense, yeah.
Yeah. So this is why I've set up this portion of it to be a no-op. So basically, once you get the atoms, you collect your molecule, you run through your templated process to get your page, to only really get back your molecule. So you don't have to worry mentally about the implementation of that step.
When you're talking about designing very complex websites with all kinds of different niches and stuff, this type of design strategy, I'm assuming, doesn't really do a whole shotgun blast all at once. It's like you describe this area as a molecule, you describe this area as a molecule, and then a bigger molecule is kind of tying them together somehow, and then maybe a template over all that is like arranging where they go.
Where the shotgun blast is supposed to arrange itself. So every time you shoot the damn thing, it's going to actually implement.
But even if the functionality of your website is so complex with so many niches and different areas, that's all just being roped together with molecules.
Yeah, you go back over the design process, you create more templates, and then you feed them back through the templates and get more molecules that fit your niche to put into as another atom into the next phase. So it's always recursive. So you can literally...
It seems like a whole programming paradigm that's supposed to work with like open source and holonic type of ideas and potential and all that. And I'm feeling like I'm getting this feeling again, like this type of a language should be taught, this type of language tech stack should be taught to kids or whatever, to adults, in order to organize society in a different way wholly, like completely different.
I have no idea how this is not what the core of CS really is, fundamentally, academically. Like, computer science.
We know it's obvious.
Computer science.
It's easy to go that way.
Computer science is supposed to like take all of these notions and bind them together into something really coherent as a fucking science.
The weird thing, though, is that like something like ChatGPT, you'd think should be able to like take these constraints. Like it has to be agent centric is one term for the data structure. And why can't the AI like just do all this shit for it? But you really have to guide it. You have to have the ideas, right?
There is an answer to that particular question, and that has to do with the fact that ChatGPT is limited to being a language model. So, in theory, you can extract a lot of that kind of stuff from it, but what it's doing isn't geared towards this.
Mm-hmm.
It's geared towards interpreting what you're saying and extracting the kind of information you'd like to hear
Yeah.
from those
Yeah,
statements.
yeah. I have a feeling it would be very different if you could input a whole lot of context into it, like as in real-time data of what's going on in people's lives.
Copilot is a step in that direction. It also suffers from, let me put it this way.
The classic issues,
I've pushed it to its limits as well.
dementia.
For sure, it's just, but it's not nothing.
Cool.
It does cut out a lot of repetitive kind of shit.
With that, we'll be right back. We are approximately 20 minutes away from having to book it.
Mm-hmm.
Book it on out of here. But I feel we've done some good work today.
Yeah, I do apologize for pushing on the whole comfort thing because I am
Comfort?
programmer comfort level ordeal. The main drive behind that kind of talk from my end is I'm building a lot of fundamental architectural parts to ease development into. So
And
I
also
like
we
to get the
are-
feedback.
We
that
are
it
doing
comes
a
with it.
development meeting. I know you like the feedback. It doesn't always come in the form that you wish it would. Which I guess we all
Mhm.
have to deal with that,
It is what it is. I don't blame you.
right? But I feel like it's been a really good dev meeting today. Like, you did end up, for one, getting to share a lot of your ideas, get them down on record, right? I have to do transcripts. I was just thinking about that. I haven't done them in a while. But once we have transcripts,
Yeah.
you can just feed it straight into ChatGPT and have it
And like I've listed a lot of these words before, right?
summarize and all that.
Like you recall me mentioning pretty much every word on these pages, right? Like in terms of, oh, we're gonna do this with that, we're gonna do this with that, and all that stuff. You've seen React, you've seen React Router, you've seen Redux being mentioned many times, right? like all arbitrary text, if you look at them like separately.
Have you seen this screen? I'll point to my end, which I hope, like, as you may have noticed a few times this meeting, I've had to drive, like, dude, this is, all that matters is developing this right now.
No,
Like,
you're right.
why are we keep talking about all the millions of context? I
because-
get it because it helps.
Because at my core, I'm also not a designer. Like, I don't...
So is it uncomfortable for you?
It's just not my field.
But yet, we know what progress
I need
is.
design. I need design. I'm trying to express design,
Dude.
but I'm not designing. You know what I mean?
Programming isn't my field. Designing isn't my field.
No, you are designing. This is design. You're doing it better than I am.
Okay. Right. Well, then we have to, I think, learn to be more sensitive to each other in, like, who should be leading what.
That's
for,
the
like,
core message out of every single dev
for
meeting we ever have.
how are we progressing, right? Because we
Yeah.
both have the same kind of goals. How do we get there? And it's like,
So
for whatever the topic, you know, like
we are
who should lead,
progressing.
or
We are progressing in the sense that
it's a dynamic though.
Mhm.
Sometimes I just have to push or you push, and it's kind of like whoever pushes harder just kind of like spazzes out on the other
Here-
person
Here's our level of progress, though.
and gets a
You are
message.
capable of creating the functions from every atom and the molecule that is here. They don't have to do
Maybe.
fuck all except say
I was
they
just
are.
thinking, why don't we? Yeah,
like,
okay, fine.
Like they can say, I'm a title, I'm a feed. You know,
Okay.
that could be their only
now,
output.
tell me, this might be a good way to kind of bring it all home. Where in this structure would I try to start building these components for the whatever screen this is?
Ideally, you start a new folder for your component.
Like, can I copy this and
Yep.
be like, that's a
Yep.
new,
That's
Component.
your basic template, yeah, for sure.
okay, and
And
this
you
is the components folder, right? It has
Yeah.
to go in here.
And then you change basically what it returns.
So I need to add, how do I add something?
You'd go plus.
Add a file, okay.
You can give it a full path with directories. It'll create directories for
I
you.
just want it in components, like where it is
You're
right now.
you're already in components, so just give it a path, maybe a subdirectory.
So can we?
Type test. Just type the word test / test.jsx.
Okay. Well, like, so I want to do, like, title
Yeah.
component. Right?
Dot .jsx.
JSX.
Yeah. Or TSX if you want TypeScript enabled.
What do I want?
Do you want to use TypeScript?
I just want it to return the title of the object.
Well,
Whatever current context
okay,
object.
let's make it policy. TSX is the policy. Okay, TSX.
So that's better.
TSX, because it gives you the TypeScript.
It just adds. It gives you the option. You don't have to
Yes.
use it.
Exactly.
Okay, then that's the standard.
And then you paste. And then you change hello world to the word title
For now.
for now. Now, anywhere this component is going to be used,
Function.
yeah,
title?
change the words.
Does it have to be capital?
It's the standard.
The standard, okay. But this is good now?
Yep.
Okay.
Anytime.
Do I save it?
Yep.
What do I do?
Just commit.
Commit?
Yep.
Directly to the branch?
It's fine. I'm its manager. I can deal with the fallout.
If it's messed up completely? If it ruins everything?
That's weird. It's GitHub's own problem. Just click on your components. It's there.
Component.
Test. Title. It's all there. Beautiful.
Okay.
So right now, anytime this component is going to be used in another component, the text title will show up.
Mm-hmm.
The logic of what shows up is
Can
based
develop
in this
down the road.
function.
It's there.
Yeah, so you've literally done the first step. Past that, you're going to be creating a test, and the test is going to be like, render my component with attributes XYZ. The test will be like, is this what it's rendering? Am I rendering an error? Am I rendering the title? Am I rendering, just to make sure it's working properly, right? Like doing the things it's promising to do.
Right. Is this like it sounds like an error handler return or whatever, like one is success or something?
Yeah, like render it in this state, render it in that state, render it in this state, render it in that state. When you do those renders, am I rendering the correct output? Like, did my if statement work?
Mm-hmm.
That's what you plug into in your tests. Like all of the different decisions the component is going to make,
Yeah.
it's going to be like,
Yeah.
and it's not going to be a big set of decisions. It's just going to be a very small.
That sounds like an add-on on top of setting up the components, the basic
Yeah.
components.
The initial thinking that you need to do is like, what's the markup that I'm going to output? What final document markup am I looking for? Because like everything's going to be server driven, right? To begin with, there's not going to be the whole active React component interfering with any of the logic. You just need to think about the progressive. I get this data, I got to work with this data,
Yep.
and I'm going to return shit based on the said data. You're doing it. Yes.
Yeah. Simple. Just taking care of business.
We're probably, not now, but probably as we develop this, are going to start to have an atoms folder in the components folder. And it's going
Sure.
to list out all of the atoms plus all of the different quote unquote pages that are full blown implementations of molecules through templates,
Mm-hmm.
and recurse the process. And that's it. There's, in the design system, all we're interested in is facilitating atoms to the point of molecules, templating them back into full-blown components,
Pardon.
which are then reusable as, again, atoms. Repeat the strange loop.
I feel like we've done some good work today, made some progress, and I hope
This is
as
understandable.
far as you looking for feedback of people telling you, does this help or whatever, is this good? To me, to actually do things is what gives that, like,
So go back to
understanding.
go back to the GitHub. I will show you something. Go inside source. There should be a document.
index.
Component. Go to components. Document. Look at what it returns. More specifically, this part right there, this
A
line.
URL.
No. Div ID root, hello world component, and div. I'm trying to give you an example of like where how your component is going to now show up in a different component.
So this is like a sort of master component.
Yeah, that
in
composes.
in the grand scheme of laying out what is an HTML document that can be viewed in Firefox or Chrome.
Right. So so everything is going to be in these like little weird functions that represent the output of the HTML of the markup, and whenever they can't directly represent markup, they'll fall back to using another component to do that job.
Sure.
So ideally, everything that comes out of the document
I've noticed.
is not going to be raw HTML. It's going to be only components from the atoms section. I'm bypassing a shit ton of that right now.
Yeah, like you'd almost expect that like some of this HTML stuff would become a component itself to be
Yeah.
pulled in.
Well, right now it is the document component, and that's got to do
Yeah, it's
with...
fine. You're just mashing a bunch of things together.
Yeah.
I see.
But there's your live example of like what happens when you create a component and what happens when you need to use the component. You just explicitly put it as an HTML tag in the rest of your returned HTML. And whatever parameters you need to give it are going to be attributes. So it's just the same as you would in normal markup pass like a value,
So,
key
yeah.
value pairs.
Yeah. It creates like an object interface front
Mm-hmm.
to gain access to the shape of the page.
And this is how you stop worrying about jumping from HTML to JavaScript to CSS to... like, you never switch contexts.
Yep.
Just
Right.
return your markup.
In other words, you
Put
don't
it
have these
together.
translation points where you have
Mhm.
to like ad hoc create something to tie something together.
That's the reason behind using this generator system to get rid of all
I'm
of that.
down.
Get
Maybe
rid of
this
all
is
of that.
maybe I didn't never like programming because all the paradigms were like ultimately
Manual.
ultimately retarded.
And manual. This is what you do when you don't want to do the manual shit.
Just automate everything
Yeah. Yeah.
and create code that just slowly ferments itself into like perfection.
Yeah, with like little tiny...
And handling everything, like everything just comes into the same code.
You can see how like this document thing is like a little dumb translation function. It could
Yeah.
accept a couple of parameters and replace like this attribute or that attribute value or whatever, and just be like a dumb program.
To be fair, something like Firefox should be able to display something even if you rip off this entire header.
Oh, that's the next holy grail. Basically embed React-like style processing right into the browser through ASM assembly.
What's okay? What?
Oh yeah,
you lost me. I don't even know what's going on.
Dude, WebAssembly is a standard that allows you to write what's effectively it's not binary, it's assembly code style. So basically, you can embed anything
Yeah.
you want right into the browser, and it'll work exactly like you would imagine, like C++ or whatever.
I'm imagining it
It's-
sounds cool. It
it's
sounds potent.
way beyond this project.
Sounds
but-
potent.
Yeah, but it's like it's been up in my ideas front for quite a while.
I'm sure it'll link in, won't it?
Like,
It won't it? It will, won't it?
so all of these branded libraries like React,
genericizing things.
Yeah, yeah.
It's all about that getting isomorphic to
Like-
the center, towards isomorphism.
like literally remove React from the picture, remove Redux from the picture,
This
remove
whole
React
this whole tech
Router.
stack, they're all aligned in the same sort of holonic layering, if you will, right?
They
The-
allow
the
for
self,
it. They
the
allow,
self-same.
They're not
attempting-
aware of it,
Yeah,
but they
yeah, well-
allow for it.
and within the language that it allows is describe the rest of the stack, right?
Thank you.
Anyways,
This is the point of understanding.
and that's
I've been
why
searching
Zhenya's
for.
tech stack is awesome. I'm gonna cut
And
it
I-
off there pretty much.
and-
Last
and-
remarks.
It's funny that it's like it's coming from the non-technical, quote unquote. You are technical, but not in the sense. Person. It's
I'm a
just like,
networking guy. Communication tech.
because like so much of that information, like from being into those worlds, could muddy the water.
I appreciate it, and like I'm reminded of like the OSI stack, right? And like what we're doing is just extending that to its
to make application
to where it
layer
should
not,
go.
Not arbitrary,
To,
but actually like
just extending it. It
full
shouldn't.
circle.
It shouldn't be just used by a company to make profit or something like as the end result. No, you keep building the stack. That's the point of the OSI model. Is you keep building the stack.
You build it such that it comes around and starts sending messages back down through the bottom of the stack for itself. To tell itself
Right.
like why it
And every
why
layer
I'm doing
every
this
layer
sh-
must ultimately come back down to that, and that's what they do. But you keep going up higher and higher layers, right?
So if it's not, obviously we're not OSI. So if it's not the OSI stack, but an extension of it, we have an opportunity for one more branding. It's not the polyverse. The polyverse is the complete product.
Okay.
But there's something that is about that extension of
OSI
that
stack. What? It hit me with it. I can't take it anymore.
Like the extension of the OSI stack to itself, it's like its own project, and the polyverse project sees that as a whole, but it doesn't have a special compartment for what that little sub project might be called. There's another name here. There's another brand to that's not the dashboard, that's not the polyverse, it's just the extension of that OSI stack. You see what I mean?
I'm kind of getting like civilization vibes, and like just publishing a model and having ownership over it. These things be like being significant
The
over
CIV
time.
stack.
Civ stack. Yeah.
Initially
like-
comprised of the
right.
OSI, but then guides the layer of application development.
The Civ stack. Yep. Something like that.
through
Right? Just
dashboard.
think bigger than OSI, right?
And all it is basically a filter on the application layer to say all applications gotta conform to dashboard protocol. That's how it extends the layering stack, right? By saying that
Exactly.
but the dashboard is what the application
That's how you build
is doing.
within this sort of architecture. You always keep recycling the languages below, the domains below, the capacities of what's below. And it's explicit, and you can't fuck it up because the interface is given to you.
And we already established that because of our handling of HTTP and handling of any of these different formats of data transmission protocol.
I am positively interested. I like today's development. I feel like we did some good concrete things with the wireframing model.
If anything, I hope to my biggest hoping capacity
Yes.
that the
Two.
development environment is so fucking approachable that you don't need to understand
and again,
everything.
you and I right now are doing what needs to be done to make that approachable, because I can sort of white knuckle this shit and like barely and follow you, but then once that's done, then there's something for people to look at. And that's what would always have helped me. If I don't have to like sense this out like with a cane, like a white stick or something, is just if there's already somebody who just got onboarded before me and I can look at their log, like their context, their interview. Like that's what this would be.
Check this out. Check
Hey,
this.
Vladislav Shular, who said what's going on, who knows how long
Oh
ago.
my goodness.
What's
I'm
going on is
sorry.
we're piecing out.
Yeah, I'm sorry I
I'm
missed
not
that.
sure when the timestamp was on this.
Shit. My apologies.
We're just going to pin your message. What's going on?
So check this out. Right now, if you were to like tackle this and all you knew is like I can create a square in HTML.
But dude, all I'm saying is I get it well enough. We've done tons. It's great. Now people can follow that. If I just keep going on and solidify this and develop a bit more, there will be plenty enough stuff for people to look at and see, okay, I see what it means to be a developer. I can, of the UI. I can do it. We just did an example here.
Allow me to pat myself on the back. And I want to say this.
Beautiful, man.
Let me put it this way.
We've done it.
I want to get it up.
We have to peace out, though.
So,
It is the homing times.
check this out.
Mm-hmm.
You can create HTML squares in every one of these fucking functions. Be like, okay, how do I make a square in HTML? Okay, return that HTML from my function, right? And it'll put on square on screen.
Okay. It could be a one-cell table, maybe.
I'm referring to the wireframe. So check this out. You just create the wireframe by creating a bunch of squares.
Oh yeah. No. I get it, man. I get it. This is
This is what's so fucking.
It's so unsurprising,
it's
isn't it?
Brain dead.
Isn't it just so unsurprising?
It's just so fucking brain dead. That's what I'm getting at.
Anyways, I'm gonna stop it right here because we are at the time limit, pretty much, of piecing out.
Yep.
Props to Vladislav for chilling out and asking what's going on, but that's what it is. Development meetings.